Hello, everyone. Welcome to Developing Palates. I am Aaron Loomis, coming to you from the Drew Estate Studios. And tonight we have a very special show. We're having a panel discussion. One of the things that we've been doing with IPCPR recaps for a while. Typically, it's been done with media only from that perspective. And Eric and Coop have participated in those in the past. But tonight we've expanded that window. We're adding some retailers to the mix, as well as some Cigar Brands exhibitors from the trade show. We get some points of view from all those angles as we kind of do a recap of this trade show that we just passed up. So I'm going to introduce our guests. I'm going to go in the order that I see them on my screen, so nobody be offended if I don't get to you first. But starting off is Terence Reilly from Aganorsa Leaf. Terence, how you doing tonight?
Hey, brother. What's going on?
Not much. Glad you could join us. Next up is Eric, Master Sensei from Cigar Dojo. How you doing, Eric?
I'm here. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me on, brother.
Absolutely. Next is Jay Davis from Blue Smoke of Dallas and newly elected PCA Board Member. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Howdy, guys.
And next up is William Cooper from Cigar-Coop. How you doing, Coop?
Hey, Aaron. What's going on, man?
Not much. And last, well, I won't say last because he's not the last one, hopefully. And that is...
You introduced Saka before me. There was a real problem with your screen.
I wouldn't have done that. Is Honest Abe from Smoke Inn. How you doing, Abe?
Hey, what's going on?
Thank you for joining us tonight. So the way I'd like to start off the show is actually talk about something pre-show, and that is kind of your outlook when you knew that you were going to be attending the trade show, and kind of what your expectations were, or kind of what your mindset or whatever was going into. I know I'll kind of use the term COVID boom for, the increased smoking sales, purchasing, all of that of cigars that we've kind of been going through. But I guess I'll start off with the retail side and kind of get, Jay and Abe's look at this is based on how your business had been functioning leading up to the trade show. And I know, Abe, you're kind of in a little bit different situation because you hadn't attended a few trade shows previous to this. And then this was your first one coming back. But what was your kind of outlook, I guess, going into the trade show, and what were your expectations of what you wanted to get out of it? And either one of you can hop in.
You can start, Jay.
Well, my expectations were mild. I had not been to the trade show since 2018, and I didn't go in 2019. And obviously last year it was canceled. So my expectations were that it was probably going to be a bust, and that companies were not going to have product to ship. They were not going to have many new cigars. I expected a number of line extensions, and I was pleasantly surprised by the results.
Okay. And then with the amount of sales that was going on through your store leading up to the trade show, did you have an anticipation of doing a lot more buying than you would typically do at a show, or what was your kind of game plan going in?
My game plan going in is I had a healthy budget of what I needed to get. And what surprised me was two things. One, the number of shipments that arrived the week I was at the trade show, which is unusual, but also by the number of sales. I had to adjust a lot of my orders and increase them. Typically, we see a fall off in sales of maybe 25-30% during the trade show, because people know that we're sort of at a low point inventory wise, and people are looking forward to new things. But we were quite busy when I was gone, and I found myself with my iPad expecting 4 or 5 boxes of backstock and certain things, and finding that I didn't have any. So I ordered a lot more than I anticipated, and I literally left every booth talking to my brother, who's my business partner, saying, I didn't plan on ordering so much, but I didn't realize how much we needed. And with very few exceptions, we ordered what we needed. And with sales being up so much this year, I was just sort of surprised after each booth how much I spent. And then obviously on a macro level, I was way beyond what I planned. But I'm not worried about it, because right now sales are good, and I think they will be for a period of time, whether that's a month or a year or 2 years. But we're definitely in some sort of growth bubble. And we ordered what we needed, and we rolled the dice on a couple new brands, but for the most part, we just stocked up on things that are selling, and we went deeper than usual because sales are much healthier than usual.
Okay. Abe, how about you? What was the kind of outlook going into the show?
I had a unique situation, and not to take over the show, but I'm just curious. Jay, why hadn't you gone to the show those 2 years that you mentioned before COVID? Because I mean, obviously you were compelled to go this year, no matter what, being on the board. But why did you not go the 2 years that you didn't go?
Well, part of it was health, and part of it was a dissatisfaction with the PCA. I didn't go in 2015 because I didn't see the point. And in 2017, I just had a heart attack, so that was out. 2019 was kind of a combination of both. The heat really got to me the previous time I went, and I wasn't very encouraged. And I spent a lot of time, quite frankly, over the last 2 years on the phone with Scott Pierce, the PCA, and I told him about many things I was unhappy about. And Scott told me the direction that he and the board were going. And I said, okay, I'm done complaining. What can I do to help change things? And to my utter shock, they decided to run elections. And before they did the elections, you had to fill out like a 3 or 4 page document, and then you had to explain why you had not been going to the trade shows or why you had. And I honestly, I didn't think I qualify. And I was quite candid. I said, I stopped going because I'd given up. And that's why I think in a lot of ways, I was very excited to see that things were changing. And I think that they're going to change more and more.
So I hadn't gone because obviously, early in my career, going to the trade show was a vacation write-off for the most part. I mean, not early on, I had to go, but at some point it just gets to, hey, my wife and I get to go to Vegas and write it off as a business expense and have a good time. And then as you have a family and you have kids and your time becomes, really scarce and there's not really extra time, especially in the summer when you have young kids. That's our family time with kids. It just was never imperative for me to go. Really was no reason for me to go to Vegas. It's an expense to go to Vegas, no matter what. You're either flying people out there and you're spending money, and if you bring your wife, she's spending money, and it's an expense. So I hadn't gone for years. After the announcement of the Big Four not doing the trade show, and there was a whole solidarity movement, I had made a decision to go during that year. So during the COVID year, I was going to go just out of solidarity to show my presence. And I was in a different situation this year now because obviously my company is growing and we're opening up a brand new warehouse. And my operations guy really has nothing to do with that part of the business. He helps run all the retail locations. So that responsibility fell on me. So I actually went and worked. I was running around. I don't know when Terence in his whole career could say he saw me at a trade show and took an order from me, but he sure took one from me this year.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, right? So it was very much a working show for me. So I ended up going both because I committed to go for solidarity reasons the year before, and I actually had to go and work this year.
So thanks for joining us, Steve. For everybody that's just joining us, Steve Saka is the the missing counterpart now that's here.
I just do want to thank Eric Guttormson deeply for my signed.
Yeah, baby.
What was that for?
You can retire on that, Abe.
Yes.
What was the bet? What was the bet?
Just got a semester of I don't know what, but for the this was whether or not the PCA was going to happen this year. We made this bet early on in the year.
Yep.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for, Abe. Just support you.
So, Steve, what we're talking about right now is kind of the outlook going into the show. With the increased demand for cigars, increased sales, and things like that. I was kind of getting Abe and Jay's point of view from the retailer side. So now I'd like to get Terence and Steve, your point of view from the brand side. Kind of going into the show, what was your expectation already having kind of that increased demand and things of that nature going on? What was your expectations of kind of heading into the trade show?
Go, Terence.
And
I'll listen.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So I was pretty positive about it. I kind of looked at it this way. In 2019, we had a great show for us. We're kind of on an upward swing. And I think, in fact, I'd have to confirm this, but I think it was the best show we'd ever had in 19. And that was considered, generally speaking, not a very great show overall. So the way I looked at it was, well, there's at least the same amount of people that are going to this show. That they obviously have made a big push to get retailers to attend. Abe attended, as he said. I haven't seen him at a show or written an order with him at one in quite a while. And we've also grown over the past couple of years, so more people would probably be, amicable to coming to see us if they're there. So that paid off, and it was basically what we expect. I mean, it was actually, I would say, better than what we expected. But we definitely thought we were going to have a good show.
What was your outlook going in, Steve?
I was also optimistic. I was one of the few. I increased my booth size. I brought more people, but it's also based on a lot of what Terence was saying. We're also in an upward swing. 2019 was our best show. Every show has progressively gotten better for us. So I didn't see this going backwards. And I also, because of my experience at TPE, knowing how just buoyant everybody was from just the good vibe of being out, I thought that we would see that exhibited also at PCA. So the only thing that for me that was a bit of a jeopardy was I didn't know how my no discount, no deal thing would put me in a hole. It probably did, but we still did a bigger number without it. So that was the one thing that I was apprehensive about going into the trade show. And then the fact that I'm not getting enough sleep. In fact, that's what I was doing now, guys. I was sleeping. That's why I was late. I apologize.
Not a problem. All right. So from the media side, Eric, we already know you were down on it, thinking that it wasn't even going to be a trade show. So we kind of have a bit of insight there. But knowing that there was one that you were going to be attending, that you were going to be covering the trade show, Coop and Eric, what were your guys' kind of outlook going into the show?
Well, now, first of all, when I made the bet with Abe, it wasn't any diss against the PCA so much as it was,
right.
We were still in that weird sort of, part of this whole COVID thing where we just weren't sure, things were changing week to week. And so I figured it was a fair bet. I lost, but then once we knew we were going into it, I think I said on my show a few times, like, I really wasn't sure what to expect. Like like part of me would think, this is probably going to be pretty normal. Other parts of me was saying like, oh my gosh, like, just thinking of all the brands that weren't going to be there. You'd take General and Altadis just combined, and you're thinking, wow, it's going to be easier to cover for one. So that was sort of I was really just kind of up in the air, not sure what to think. We had just gone to TPE, which I thought was a really cool show. So I thought, well, maybe it'll be, pretty cool. So I wasn't really sure. I was kind of up in the air.
All right, Coop, how about you?
Well, mine was kind of similar to what Steve was saying. And I think some of this, Aaron. I came out of the 2019 show, and, Bear had been working with the show with me, and he had done a couple of interviews at the show. And I knew I wanted to put Bear in front of the camera more at this show. So I think, I wanted to bring a third person in to kind of help me out and help Bear out and float between the two of us. We lucked out when Ben Lee became available to become a fourth guy. So I was going in with this 4-man crew, and I was kind of happy we had a smaller trade show because I knew we'd have to adjust and gel as a team. So I was kind of taking this approach where I was going all in this year. Yes, I knew the big four weren't there. Yes, I knew it was a smaller footprint. Yes, I knew there was less traffic, but what a perfect opportunity to do this gelling. And we had to do some gelling. It took about a day and a half to kind of get what we had to do and get our emotion going. On the other side, I'm going to be straight here, and people are going to hate me for saying this. I was really hoping we'd have more of a kind of a TPE type of show in terms of some of the safety protocols. That's just my opinion. That's me personally. I'm not saying, I know people don't like that, but it was a little too loose for me so early coming out of the pandemic. And that's just me. So I was hoping we would see a little more in the safety protocol area. In the end, it probably wasn't a big deal because when you walked outside the trade show, particularly when we were walking through Caesars on Saturday night and how packed it was it didn't make a difference. So,
Yeah.
so at that point, I was like, it wouldn't have mattered being on the floor or not being on the floor. I was fine with that at that point.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's move into the actual, I guess, still a little bit ahead of the show, but we're at the show at this point, and probably Terence and Steve have the first look at the show floor, kind of starting to see it build out. We all know it's going to be a smaller footprint. So Terence and Steve, what were your impressions when you initially saw kind of what it was going to become?
Well, I kind of knew because I mean, I knew everyone was going to scale back for the most part. I know most people were going to do, not everybody, but a lot of people were going to do lighter booths. I know Perdomo was a bit on the fence to the last minute, so they opted to set up their TPE booth. I thought for sure that Ashton had canceled because I was right beside them and I was watching their booth not be built for 3 days. I mean, it was kind of, and there were some surprises too. I mean, I was kind of surprised at what the Saga Debonair guys put together. I mean, that was a pretty impressive booth. So I gotta say, I kind of like the smaller footprint. So from that perspective, I liked that. It just made it easier to cross from edge to edge. I know it made it easier for me to get my fat ass to my booth. I'm sure it made it much easier for the retailers to go around. So I like the more compressed environment. So it was kind of what I expected. I mean, we knew that the exhibitors were going to be light and we knew they were going to be scaled numbers. So there were really no surprises other than I didn't realize how stark it would all be. It seemed like the walls were really stark. I think because of the lack of sponsors for some of the big things, we were missing some color pops that we would normally see. But I wasn't, and I was really surprised at how bad the Sands was at laying carpet. They were really miserably bad at it this year. I have to think we were the first show in because I don't think there was a decent carpet scene in the place.
We were.
And Terence, you guys went with a little smaller booth this year, correct?
Yeah, and that was prior to any COVID or anything like that. I think what we looked at is that after TPE last year, we noticed that I think the mentality of the big booth was kind of from the days of you didn't see anybody and you didn't really have contact with anybody except at the show for the most part, going back 20 years or whatever it is. And it was basically like, okay, we need some big couches so we can all sit down and we can all catch up and ask about family and friends and kind of share a smoke together and keep that relationship alive. And that was a big part of the large booth. And with FaceTime and Zoom and email and whatever else, WhatsApp you can come up with, you can get anybody anytime you want, and anywhere in the world. That model, I don't think is necessary or it's outdated basically. And so what we wanted to have a place where people could come in, see the product, do business, and then we could all hang out at the bar or go out to dinner or do that. And I think that's good for everybody. Not everybody stays for all 4 days. They need to see as many booths as they can. And then we obviously want to make sure we have time when people come in the booth for everybody. So just the idea was to make it large enough where nobody was going to be sitting on the floor, wouldn't be able to get in, but also not wasting space on kind of luxury and hanging out and that kind of thing.
All right. I'll go to the media guys. So Eric and Coop, what was your thought on the floor once you kind of got in there?
Go ahead, Coop.
I was just blown away how disappointed I was. There's nothing else to say. So actually here it is. So Steve and Terence had very, very good booths. I'm going to say that very upfront. And I'm not just saying it because they're here. Look, I get economy of scale. I get downsizing booths, right? But then we had what I called the minimalist booths. And these minimalist booths were just horrible. I mean, the Ashton booths, this is Ashton we're talking about. I saw some of the Caldwell booths. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that. I didn't even like the My Father booths, to be honest with you. I did not like these open booths, which is open floor space. I felt like I was going to a flea market. And this is the Premium Cigar Association. This is premium cigars. We're selling a luxury product. And guess what? You want people to come back next year. You want people to come to this trade show. You can't have these half-ass booths. I mean, you have to have you have to be showing product. You can, and here's the thing, you could do it because here's why. Terence did a smaller footprint booth, which was wonderful. And Steve, I mean, you've been pretty open. That booth is something that you've built from IKEA, right? For the most part. Am I wrong?
Discount furniture.
Okay. It was a great. It was
Let's
a
not
great
go to
booth.
IKEA level. Not that.
Okay,
quite that
okay,
good.
okay. But you've been pretty. It was a beautiful. You can make a nice booth and save costs. Again, I want people to come back to this trade show next year. And I don't know. These booths were just very disappointing. And I don't see. Here's the other thing. I know, because you'll never know what sales are because sales aren't disclosed, right? Do these like empty booths or these wide booths, do they really turn the register? I don't know. But to me, it just didn't seem like it. I didn't see a lot of hustle and activity. The booths that had activities were the Aganorsa Leaf booth, the Dunbarton Tobacco Trust, the Placencia booth, Alec Bradley. Those booths had nice setups, and guess what? There were plenty of people in those booths.
All right, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you that when we came in for the opening reception party gala, and we went into the registration, got our badges, and then kind of walked through that giant empty hall, and then came around the corner, and there was the party, and then I looked over and I saw the area. I have to just be honest. Even though I knew the show was going to be smaller, I was still shocked.
Yeah.
It took me back a bit. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. That's the show right there. That area right there. I was shocked. And I was also look, to me, I said this before, I don't want to offend anybody, but it just seemed like here's this empty trade show hall. Guys, go throw your booths in there. There wasn't any like aisle signs or the front where you normally walk in. There's usually some like display. There was displays, big giant cigars, whatever, just to make me feel like I'm coming into some sort of really cool trade show.
Yeah.
And there was like nothing. It just seemed so
Minimalist.
Minimalist in every single way.
Yeah.
That it really did sort of take me aback. And that was my impression, Aaron, when I walked in there and looked at that.
All right, Jane, Abe, your thoughts.
You go ahead, Abe.
I'm gonna try to do this and stay on this particular topic, so we don't.
Please.
So, footprint. I don't have an issue with footprint. I've been talking about it for years. Things need to grow organically and healthy, and I believe in pruning. I think letting a lot of these big guys keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger booths forced medium guys to get bigger and bigger and bigger booths, because all of a sudden they look like nothing. And you have this massive, and you have to remember, the last time I went to a show, it included the hookah and the vape people, which took a lot of floor space. So I don't think they're even allowed now in the show. So the show was massive. And you get to that point, there's an aesthetics and a psychology to a show. If you want the show to be successful, it has to be stop thinking about it as a trade show for business and think about it like an event, right? And because if you look at what the complaints have been over the years, every year from most of the established companies, every year, no matter what issues there are in the show, whatever it is, I always hear, oh, we did more business than last year. So the business part of it has never been the complaint of what's been the problem with the show. They seem to be writing business, but yet there's been issues with this show now. Everybody knows about it. It's going on a decade long. So the writing of the business wasn't it. The aesthetics when you came in, and I think Saka's term, I think I like it best. It was trade show light. There was zero aesthetics. It was if I'm in that position and coming off a year where probably the big percentage of the show and floor space that the four companies pull out, I say to myself at this point, this next show has to be over the top. It has to be retardedly stupid. And honestly, if it's my company, my business, and I'm just running it solo, right? I say I take a loss this year if I have to. But everybody walking out that door has to say this thing was spectacular, because you have to. It's an imperative year. And you had a whole year in which you could have made plan A, B, and C, D even. So I was really working, but for me, especially somebody who I started going to trade shows a couple of years before I was even in the business and saw the insanity of the early days and then how it's progressed. And when you have a show so big, it's going to look empty no matter what, which already sets a psyche and a standard. I believe it should have gotten pruned and scaled down to a tighter, cleaner show a long time ago. So I don't worry about that. But like what Coop and Steve said about it being stark and depressing, I even said to you, Terence, at one point, close your eyes. Listen, what do you hear? Nothing. You hear whispers. It was like nothing. If I walk out of my office, to go to the bathroom and these guys forget to turn just simple background music on, I notice it immediately. I'm like, dude, it sounds like a graveyard, dude. Please, somebody turn the music on. You know, we got a lounge, no background noise, just even a background aesthetic. So just the visuals, the feel, the vibe. I mean, for somebody who actually went there to do hardcore business and work, and I was running around like I did 25 years ago, you know, it didn't faze me as far as what I needed to do coming this year. I didn't have a lot of expectations. I was hoping to be maybe a surprise little, to be taken a little bit back, but I think they said it best. It was trade show light at best. It just happened. And that's not the psychology or the mentality I would have wanted people coming and leaving with. Because I'll tell you right now, I have zero incentive to go back next year. I did what I had to do. I'm not ordering for a warehouse again. It'll be under normal procedures. And, you know, I know they threw out those, you know, I mean, I'm not going to get into a tangent. Let's just talk about the aesthetics and
All right.
go from there.
All right, Jay, what were your thoughts?
Well, I would agree with Abe that those of us who came to do business, we were able to do business. And at the end of the day, I think that's first and foremost. Also, we were able to interact. You know, I spent an hour with Michael Herklotz at the Circle Bar before the show opened. And I probably got 10 years worth of tutelage there on sales. And that's something I really appreciate about the show as well, is to be able to learn from my colleagues. Certainly, there was a Spartan feel to the show. But on the other hand, you know, it's difficult to compare TPE, which is run by a for-profit company that's $1 billion company, that has a lot of eye candy, has the marijuana, the hemp, the synthetic urine or play piss, whatever they call it, versus the PCA, which is a non-for-profit, where every dollar needs to go for fighting for our rights to smoke. And I actually appreciated the fact that not having a trade show for the last 2 years and having to cover that with one show, and the fact that they said there was a $2.5 million loss, that they didn't spend an extra $4 or $5 or $600,000 on a party. I mean, yeah, a party's fun. You know, we all remember when Alec Bradley did the big party at the Palms. But I'd rather see that money go to pay for legal fees or go to argue for a state cigar tax cap. So I think on the one hand, I don't blame the PCA, and I'm not saying this because I'm on the board now. I think it's good that they are being prudent with their money. The manufacturers, I do think that some of them could have done a better job. Ashton was an absolute embarrassment and a train wreck. And but they weren't the only ones. There were other companies like El Sotimo who they built a very nice booth. I felt that a lot of the booths were easy for doing business. And that is the primary reason that we're there. If we had Cretech behind us and we were looking to make a profit, okay, it could be more of an event. But if the reason we're there is to interact with our colleagues and to learn, if the reason we're there is to have seminars and learning good business practices and to buy and sell, I think we achieved it. And I disagree with Abe with all respect that I think this was not the year to spend like crazy. This was the year to say, hey, we've got to recover financially from where we've been. And another thing too, that, and maybe I'm more privy to this because I was getting information from the board, that they spent a lot of their time preparing for the show. They didn't, first of all, they didn't know there was going to be, if there was going to be a show. You know, Cigar Dojo may have won his bet until basically 100 days before the show. And they basically had 100 days with half their staff, including the main person who usually handles the trade show. She was pregnant. So they didn't have the staff, and they spent a lot of their energy trying to focus on, can we smoke? Because when they started preparing for the show, the concern was, can we smoke anywhere? That's why they set up the after hours bar, which obviously that didn't turn out the way we thought. But at the time, we didn't know that we could smoke at Club Luca, or we didn't know that we could smoke at the different bars. I was in Vegas back in January, and it was literally pull down your mask, take a puff, put your mask back up. And it was a very different environment. So I think they had to put a lot of their energy there to make sure there were places to smoke. There were things to do. And I will disagree also. I thought the opening party was fun. I've been to a lot of opening parties where it's really loud and you get one lousy cigar. I thought the cigars we got from Ace Prime and from Espinosa, and I apologize, I don't remember the third one, were really good. And the raffle was kind of fun and it was very engaging. But I think part of this lays on the manufacturers. If they want it to be an event, I think the manufacturers, they need to put up some more money and can't expect the PCA, a nonprofit organization, to take care of all of that when that money can be better spent in other ways to protect our businesses. But that's just my opinion.
Sure. So speaking of that opening gala, kind of a toned down industrial type look. Is that something that you're okay with? Do you expect something that's more extravagant than that to kind of kick off the event? Does it matter to you? And anybody can kind of chime in to that.
You know, the thing is about that is, in this case, they get a pass from a lot of people because so many people that was the first time people were interacting with each other. So I think this year, it wasn't really something on people's mind where everyone was just happy to get together. However, I don't think you can go back and do that next year. I think next year it's going to be a problem. So, because now I think, but I think you have, I mean, I don't know. To me, they probably could have did a lot more with that event. I don't know how the money flowed and I don't know what the budgets were. But to me, it seemed like they could have did a lot more with it.
I'd agree. I would agree, Coop. Part of the problem, and I'm not trying to throw the manufacturers on the bus, but I'm going to, is there were larger manufacturers asked to help with the opening party, and they didn't want to open up their pocketbooks. And thankfully, some of the smaller or medium-sized companies stepped up and they contributed and helped out. There are a lot of big manufacturers, much bigger than anybody that's on this call, who could have thrown 10 or 20 or 30 or $40,000 to do those things, and they didn't. And that kind of puts at a difficult position.
Sorry, take over, Aaron.
Go ahead, Abe. Chime in.
Why do you think they didn't?
Without disclosing confidences, I think that there are some companies that felt like maybe they had given enough at the CRA level, or they just, I think everyone talks a good game, but I think sometimes when the rubber hits the road, I think people say one thing and they do another. Abe, not everybody in the industry is like you. Abe, whenever you do something, you do it first class. If you say you're going to do something, you do it the best. Steve Saka is the same way. I think some of the larger manufacturers could have done more. I mean, I think Ashton could have sent one of their owners. I think Caldwell could have stayed to the last day.
Was the first day?
Huh? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I went to a booth on the fourth day to buy product, and the principal was not there, and the people that were there had no clue about their products.
Yep.
And it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and yeah, it's easy to blame the PCA for that, but isn't the manufacturer there to sell? And so I think that the manufacturers need to see this as more of a partnership with the retailers. And I agree, it would be nice to have a nicer event, but not if it's taking away money that could be used to fight for our right to have smoking lines.
So here's how you have to look at this, because I was you. I was you when I was asked to be on the board, and I'm going through the past presidents. I think it was almost 15 years ago. Okay. The problems that exist today were talked about 15 years ago when I was on the board. So all the show issues, the lack of attendance, people lack of excitement of going there. I think a lot of manufacturers slowly are losing faith in the event. So I know you talk about the business side of it, but the reality of it is, and this is something that the board hasn't either figured out or just doesn't believe, is that no one has to go there to do business. And that's the reality of the situation. Steve could have sat in New Hampshire, put out a deal on Facebook or whatever and said, this is what I'm doing, and orders would have came in. I ordered from companies that didn't go to the show, who had promotions. So if you don't accept that reality of, as a retailer, I don't have to go. Manufacturers really don't have to go. Then you have to figure out, because right now, when I was on the board 15 years ago, there was a war chest of money. I can't disclose the amount, but I know what it was. So unless it was really badly managed, 15 years later, I don't know, because this show made a lot of revenue over the years. I don't know what happened and what's been going on financially since I'm not there, because obviously we're not privy to the information. But there's not going to be a show, and then there's really no revenue. Then you really got no money for legislation. So you have to think beyond of, saving for today. The thing that I look at in my perspective is, how do we make this show thrive? Because if you make this show thrive, you won't have the financial issues. You will have manufacturers lined up to do shit because they got faith again that this is going to be great and it's going to be good exposure for our company, and it's going to be something that's going to be remembered. No one's going to remember that opening gala.
Well, and you make a good point. And my counterpoint, Abe, is although you're not on the board, you or any other retailer or any other retailer's employees are welcome to join the trade show committee and make those realities happen. And I'm not going to sit here and make apologies for the past, because I wasn't involved in the past. I can tell you that they are looking at ways to increase revenues beyond just the trade show and to do a better job. But when you lose the kind of money they lost last year, I think this was probably not the year to recommend spending a lot of money on an event. But we just disagree. That's okay.
Aaron, just real quick. I mean, Jay, I get what you're saying about, the people that went there, they did business, and all of that's 100% true. But I also think of it, I mean, me personally, I don't even care about the party. I'm usually the first one that wants to leave because I'm big crowds. I just, I'm socially kind of awkward. So I just try to get out of there. But I think of it, I'm looking at the guys retailers that, hey man, I'm going to go to Vegas for a couple of days. I'm going to have some fun, that kind of stuff. It has to be more than just doing business. You have to get these guys to realize that this is going to be a fun time. You're going to, spend a few days out in Vegas. You're going to have some fun. And, just that dark, dingy warehouse, it was just so depressing. Espinosa and Crown Heads and those guys did great. And the cigars are fantastic. I mean, I got no complaints there. Espinosa gave out t-shirts. I'm just thinking of just all the retailers that showed up thinking why would I want to go back next year? That's the thing that, you just wonder, why would people want to go back for that next year? I don't know. Cause they could do it, like Abe said, elsewhere.
And if you don't have the people come back and you don't find a way to make more people come, then whatever it is you think you saved this year is irrelevant. That's my point.
Yeah, but you think I think it's a financial thing. I mean, I think they can do that I'll tell you, we had a ton of emails from people for the exclusive stuff we did where, oh, can I get that? Why can't I get that? That's not
going to get into the exclusives because I have a retort for that as well.
Can I finish what I was saying? Sure. Wonderful. So whether it's the exclusive, I think there's various things you can do potentially, whether that's again, I'm not going to get into all the details of it and it doesn't make any difference, but I think it's really more of a financial thing. I don't think anybody's going to Vegas because of parties. I mean, if that thing was in the Taj Mahal or something like that, or in the Palazzo and the rooftop or whatever it is, I don't think anybody goes, oh, well, now I've got to go back to Vegas and do this all next year. Or maybe very few. I think it's mostly in the long term, it's got to be a financially good decision. And yes, is it nice to have parties and it's nice to have beers and it's nice to have all that other stuff? I don't think that anybody is ultimately going for that. You can do that anytime at better times of the year in Vegas than in the summer when it's 120 degrees. I think that the main enticement is for people to do stuff that's unique for it and that can't get otherwise, and to have some sort of deal structure. Like the deals we offered for July were only for the show. And we had an exclusive product for the show, and that seemed to be effective. Again, I don't know if that is the answer in the long run. Maybe Abe has an answer to that, but I think it's got to be a financial answer. I don't think it's parties and things like that personally.
Never going to be a financial answer because it'll always be cheaper to stay home and do it. You know what I mean? Listen, if you're one of these guys who you go by yourself, did you come by yourself, Jay, or did you bring somebody with you?
My brother came with me from Chicago. He's an owner of the store.
Okay, so to fly two people out, pay for the hotel, and you end up inevitably spending money. It's never going to be that great financially. You know what I mean? It's just not. You can't just say it's not going to be easier to do it from home. And the PCA specials. Okay, so for years it's been an argument. Trade show deals should be trade show deals. No manufacturers ever adhered to that since the beginning of time. We know that. They all fight to get their deals out before the show because they want to snag everybody. It's been going on forever. So unless you can find a way to make that hold water, that's not going to work. Human beings are experience driven. We're emotional people. You need to find a way to tap into that. I've done it successfully in my business.
Abe, I don't disagree with you, but when you have retailers complain that they don't want to spend $450 to join the PCA when it costs about $900 a retailer to run the show, I mean, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. The retailers in general don't want to pay their dues.
Yeah.
A lot of the big manufacturers don't want to.
Jay, stop. Problem's
Wait,
not.
wait, wait, I don't
the
cut you
problem's
off
not-
when you're
stop.
going on a rant.
The problem isn't the PCA.
I don't think so.
Okay, the problem is that just trade show model is dead for everybody. That's
And
the
I don't
problem.
disagree with either one of you about that.
And the problem is doing a trade show in Vegas is horrifically expensive. And there's no way for the economics to ever work for either the manufacturer or the retailer. It's a complete loss. There's no other way around it. So the only person that can potentially win in this in the long run is that we gain enough funds for the legislative effort. And if that's our goal, then let's make that our goal and figure out how to get rid of this albatross of the trade show. Because look, I'm a company that's done really well by the trade show, and still it really isn't worth it even for me. And I'm doing great at the trade show compared to most companies, but my day is coming because I'm starting to hit the ceiling of the number of buyers you have at the trade show. So, and if we had 200 plus less buyers this year, in a year that was probably arguably our industry's best year in a long, long time since the boom, okay, cash flow wise, we all sold more cigars. I made more cigars. I sold more cigars. You sold more cigars. Everybody was flush with cash. Everybody's like, we all can already tell people are dying to get out of their houses. They're going all over the damn place. Okay. If we can't get more than 547 buyers, I think that was the number, Coop, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But if we can't get more than that, then that just is, hey, that's it. We can't. So let's stop and figure out something that works, because I agree that this is not a model that's working for anybody. I don't think it's working for the retailer. I don't think it's working for the manufacturer. I don't think it's working for the PCA. And there has to be a better way to skin this cat, because we've been nibbling around the edges of this issue now for going on a decade with no real progress. And you guys on your end thinking that there's a solution to fix this, there isn't, because it's not even working for the porn people at AVN, for God's sakes. They're having lower attendance and they got naked hot chicks, okay? So if they can't make this work, how the hell do we think we're gonna make this work? And that's why this whole thing, and I hate the word, I don't want to use that word, but we have to figure out a better way of getting the retailers back involved. And we have to figure out a better way of doing business than this model, because this model, it's going to die, Jay. Just accept
I don't disagree with you, Steve.
So why are we, I mean, the fact that I have to go back again next year, okay, and I have to go back the year after that, because I guess that's what the contractual obligation is. I'm almost kind of interested is, what does it cost to get out of the damn thing? Is it actually cheaper to get out and to figure out something else? You know, let me know, what is my cut here? What does this take? Because we can't have 25% less attendance in a situation that's already been declining for a decade plus. I mean, what does this mean? Next year we have 410 retailers. Well, Abe says he isn't going, so I'm already down one. Okay, I don't know if Jeff will go, so I'm probably down two. I mean, I just know that what we have doesn't work. And I don't completely blame the PCA. because I think the problem is much bigger than that. I think it's just escalating costs, convention space, travel expenses, the fact that the world is flatter and we all do business 24/7 regardless, the fact that we're never going to get the discounts to ever be held back by the manufacturer. That was never, ever going to happen. It was always a pipe dream. We just have to completely rethink this and stop. We can beat this horse to death, but it does not fucking matter. This trade show is dead. It's on life support. And if you think that kicking in more money, obviously the retailers aren't going to kick in more money. And obviously what we saw in the manufacturers aren't going to kick in more money. So this this is not workable. So we can critique this trade show all we want, but honestly, we're just wasting our time. That's
Steve,
my opinion.
Steve, you're 100% right. Scott has presented some ideas to the board that we're working on, because I think you're right. Trade shows in general just don't work. So there are some things on the table they're looking at. I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's a committee that's been set up looking at alternative ways, options to this. The reality is we still have 2 years left in the contract, and I don't know what the liquidation damages are to get out of it, but I do know that the vision that Scott and the board have is not to just continue to go to Vegas every year ad infinitum until nobody shows up. And I do agree with you that this model is dead across the board in all industries, but there are other options that I think would be more palatable financially and would be more of an event and more fun. There's other things that can be done. And I know it sounds like political doublespeak, but they are looking into that, and they've been looking at that for a while. And also, I think another point to add is to get more input from the manufacturers as well, because the manufacturers are ultimately the clients of the trade show or whatever the trade show is replaced with. So I don't disagree with you, Steve, at all.
All I know is I floated an idea 4 or 5 years ago that I thought was the most feasible. It's not perfect, but I just don't see any change. I don't see any desire to change. I just see this kind of like, it is what we do, so therefore we do it.
Path of least resistance.
Yep.
Away.
Yeah, and this is getting us nowhere. It's
Mostly because the same people have been running it for decades. You've had an executive board made of the same people for decades. Now, Jay, you're all gung ho in 2 years. There's a 90% chance you're going to be off the board. You're done. They might invite you back 2 or 3 years later. But the same core of people. See, look, first off, let's look at leadership, because this problem's, like Steve said, over a decade old. This ain't this year's problem. There was stuff that led up to why the Big Four left. There's been dissension in the ranks since I got on the board. When I got on the board, this is 15 years ago, manufacturers had no voice. Okay, so you're talking about essentially a function of a show that without the manufacturers, you've got nothing. They had no voice. And the year I was on the board, they elected, I forget what it's called now, but it's like, okay, one manufacturer gets one vote. And it's like they threw them this cheeky bone. Here you go. You get to get one seat on the board. And I forget what the name of it is, but they get a board position. And the people that have been there for decades plus, because you gotta remember the way the system works now is, I don't know who got voted in now. Somebody got voted in as secretary. That guy's going to spend 12 years on the board.
right.
That guy's going to spend 12 years on the board. The
Automatically becomes president.
eventually he does
Yeah.
three level.
Unless he dies first.
What was that?
Unless they die first.
They die.
They become president.
When I was on the board, one of the first things we did was cut one of the executive board things, because there used to be a vice president 1 and a vice president 2. The way the whole system of the board was designed to keep this old school of people controlling it for decades. And that's what it's been. I mean, the same people are involved in it for decades. And every one of them, or the majority of them, are people who are either on the board or presidents of the TAA, which, if you ask me, has been a conflict of interest. So at the end of the day, if you ask me in the last 15 years, has anything really, really been done? Steve said he gave an idea. I gave an idea 15 years ago. Ideas been thrown at him. And it's nothing against you, Jay. You just dived in the water. You're just seeing it, but we've been looking at this for a long time. No, it's the path of least resistance. And it's been that way.
And the thing about it, Jay, is so many people have gotten onto that board with high hopes and optimism, trying to make a difference. And ultimately, what ends up happening is if you talk to all of those people that are somewhat forward thinking, they will all tell you what a soul crushing experience being on that board turns out to be. And we're talking about some of our very best retailers in the country, the guys that have taken really shitbox nothing and they grew it into something. And yet these people get ignored while I see people that run, no offense, nice store, brick and mortar, great, but basically businesses that have been stagnant for all practical purposes for a decade to 2 decades. And these are the people that are ultimately making the decisions. And these are the ideas. No, what I want is I want the hot shit guy that's burning shit up, that's making a difference, coming up with creative and unique and innovative ideas. Those are the guys that I want ultimately making the decision. Or I want the people that are in those board positions to go, maybe I don't know everything. And maybe I should listen to some of these other people because I look at how successful they are. Because the truth is, it's a level playing field out there. So the retailers that have grown into what they've grown into, they didn't have any different playing field than all the other retailers. So I have a really hard time thinking that they have any interest in wanting to change because they've had plenty of opportunity to change and they've just decided not to. And this is what it's brought us to. And I'm just befuddled by it. And I've said this from the beginning and I continue it. I'm ride or die. I'm with the board. I want the PCA to do well, but what we are doing is not working and it will not work. And the quicker they accept it and they rip this Band-Aid off and they figure out how to make this better, the better off everybody's going to be, including the fundraising efforts for the CRA and for the legislative and the legal thing. Because the way it's going now, there ain't going to be any money for that.
I was going to tell Aaron, I want you to put on your calendar to make a show 3 years from now so we can talk to Jay.
Oh, don't worry about it. We'll cover. Yeah, we'll do this every year.
I completely agree with you. And trust me, my first 9-hour meeting, which I might add was in a room where I couldn't smoke, which really pissed me off. I spent half the meeting saying, why the hell are you doing things this way? All I can say is that I do believe that there is some positive change. I mean, my God, we actually had open elections for the first time in 100 years. They actually talked about finances for at least 45 seconds. That stuff's going to have to continue to happen. I agree. The board is going to have to change or they're going to die. And if 3 years from now, if they died, they died. But I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to rattle people and piss them off until we change. And I do think we have an effective leader in Scott Pierce. The problem is he's the exact opposite of the baseball commissioner. He has no power. All he can do is recommend to the board. And that's another thing, in my opinion, that needs to change. I think the board needs to let their executive director have some power.
They don't.
And
it's been that way since I was there 15 years ago.
That's right.
Someone who's going to execute what they decide. It's a big position. It's enough.
You may be very well right.
I feel bad for Scott Pierce.
I do too.
He's the guy who takes all the flack no matter what the decisions are. But it started when I was there. They want a guy who they're going to make the votes on, and then he does all the work trying to make it happen. That's it. And look, I am friends with all these people. Some of them are going to be upset with me, but it's probably why I've never been invited back on the board. Because at the end of the day, they don't want to hear a guy like me. They don't want that. And this is the problem. The leadership hasn't pivoted, hasn't adjusted, hasn't done a thing in a decade now. They say they will, they say they did, but if they did and none of us know it, then what was the point? Because I haven't felt it as a retailer. I don't think Steve or Terence has felt it as a manufacturer. So even if they want to say, oh, we've made these changes, if it wasn't so effective that any of us really knew them or felt them, what was the point?
Well,
But do you
like I said, some things have changed. I mean, I got on and I'm not a member of TAA and I was actually elected. That did not exist 2 years ago. But you're right. We need a hell of a lot more change. Not going to disagree with you at all.
Go ahead, Terence.
Jay, what I was going to ask is, like, to what degree do you think it's less potentially the people on the board and just the board itself? Like, so for instance, almost everybody here is an owner. And I always say the only title in a business that matters is owner. And if you don't do what the owner says, you get the can. I mean, and it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward in that way. And I guess for me, because I'm not an owner, I work at the pleasure of Eduardo, and we have a lot of brokers who are not, it's an agreement. They don't work directly for us. You have to take kind of a different approach in that way. I just can't tell people what to do necessarily. But I mean, in a board, I would imagine it's like there's different personalities and there's different people, and everyone has their own ideas. And would it be conducive to just appoint for like, a czar for a year or two that has actual...
No, Abe, you got to put your hand down. Sorry.
Would it be productive to have somebody be like, okay, we're going to give you the authority to make those kind of decisions for the next year or 2 years, and you'll be held accountable. I mean, if it doesn't work out, you're going to be let go. But if you do, and again, I really don't know. I don't know enough about this I'm just throwing out the idea. Is that something that's feasible?
I don't know. I think a lot of things need to change. I mean, this is not my quote, but you do not have employees of PepsiCo on Coca-Cola's board, but the PCA board is controlled primarily from people that are on the TA board. And I don't care if they fire me tomorrow. That's a conflict of interest. You also have, like Abe said, you have people that have concentrated power for a long period of time. Another thing that just honestly shocks the hell out of me is how come the board meetings of the PCA are not public to all PCA members? That's unacceptable. I own one share in Microsoft. I can go to their board meeting. So by no means am I in agreement with the way things have been done. And Abe is right, and Steve is right. If we don't change things, I don't want to use profanity, but we're in a bad place.
All right, so I want to take a step back for a second. We'll have this discussion a little bit later. I want to get back into like the function of the show this year. I know there's lots of stuff that we're going to talk about.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's par for the course for this type of show and with these guests, so not a big deal.
I do want to add one thing. I'm smoking Steve's Paladin, and I hate to make his head any bigger, but this cigar is one of the best $29 cigars I've ever had. And he's not paying me to say that.
There you go.
But
all right.
It's going to eat at me real quick.
Okay.
What Terence said. I don't know if anybody here, and maybe Steve might be the only one who would know. Does anybody remember Bill Fader?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bill Fader was before my time. I came literally after Bill Fader, but from what I understood, he ran back then RTDA like it was his company. And from what I understand, had the most flourishing years ever. I don't know what the situation was back then, but I think, Jay, while you're on the board, one of the things you should definitely look at is the executive structure, how it's done. Because if you really want any kind of ingenuity, any kind of thing, you can't have the same 5, 6, 7, 8 people controlling a decade and a half of this organization. Because then if they're not the right people, you're just stuck with them. And that's the problem. So I'm done.
All right. So I want to get into kind of some of the mechanics of the show for each of the kind of the segments that you guys are, part of here. So, and you don't have to get into details because I'm not looking for that level of information. You can be in generalities, but I'm looking for kind of the overall success of the show for you personally. So I'll start on the brand side. So Steve and Terence, in regards to the actual traffic at the show, sales at the show, retailers that you were engaging with, was this a better show for you than in 2019? Kind of what was the results for the show for you in regards to how business was happening for you guys?
Steve?
Well, first off, look, 2019 was miserable. 2019, we had the combination of things were already slowing down on the industry side. The big box guys had dramatically cut their orders. They had gone to a just in time. So we were experiencing a slowdown going into that trade show. And then on top of it, we had that wonderful consumer con notification. And we also had the substantial equivalency that was hanging over our head that we really had no idea which way it was going to go, but we kind of knew our hands were in the fate of the courts was kind of the way it was looking at it. So all of those things made for a very depressing trade show, because I probably spent 75% of my time talking to my customers about that stuff and not about anything optimistic. So from that perspective, this show was way better because everybody that was there, separate of what we're talking about, sounds like it was so problematic and so awful and this and that. The reality is the feel on the show of the people that were there People were happy to be there. They had no major complaints. That part was much more pleasant. Even Abe was kind of pleasant. So that should tell you where we are. It was kind of nice. So from that perspective, I thought it was good. From the perspective of business, look, I'm in an industry of liars and thieves. There's no way that people have been progressively having better shows every year and selling more. It's just an outright lie, because when you're a certain size, the number of people that you write at the show are directly the result of how many people are at the show. So there's no way that everybody's constantly having their best year. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are people that this year, even though it was good for some booths, it wasn't good for all booths. Not everybody had a great trade show commercially. And that's the part for me that's really awkward about it, is there seems to be, under the current scenario, there seems to be certain booths that are almost set up to thrive. And it's kind of that small, but not too small, kind of known enough and on a growing upswing. So you're going to see places like, Aganorsa do well. You're going to see places like Aldino do well. You're going to see places like myself do well. But really, the people that are on the bigger end of the spectrum, they can't do well because there's physically not enough bodies. And the people that are on the lower end of the spectrum, they can't do well either because there just, again, aren't enough bodies. And they're just hoping to get one out of every 40 people to just stop in their booth and see what they're doing. I will admit that, like El Septimo, because they had set up a nice booth, people went and they visited it because it was new and it was fresh and it was different. But I don't know how many people actually wrote a lot of orders in that booth. I hope they did great. But typically it's very rough those first couple trade shows for most companies. They just kind of get their grounding in there. So from a commercial perspective, yes, I think it was good for some, not as good for others. From a mood, this was a better show mood-wise for me. I mean, it's just 2019 was literally, I wanted to eat a gun by day 2 of 2019, even though that was my best show since 2018. So it was rough. So from that perspective, I was much happier. Plus, it doesn't hurt that I spend pretty much 4 days slightly drunk. That helps a lot. So
There you go.
Slightly.
How about you, Terence? How was sales and kind of interaction with the retailers?
Best trade show ever. Now, so it actually, again, and I know people always say that, but I can tell you, I can't tell you about prior to my time really, but in the time that from 18 on, every show has been better. There was no show last year. And again, we basically focus on us having a good show. It's and this is why I have a lot of respect for Jay and the board and everything. It's easy for me to make suggestions and things. I'm not involved in that way. And so I realize it's a lot of challenges and things. So what I just look at, which I can control, is, okay, there's X amount of people going. If every single one of those people come and visit us, we're going to have an amazing show. And we try to get every single person that we can. Obviously, that's not the case, but we work towards that. And we try to have a booth that makes sense based on the size of the people there, or the number of attendants and the size of the other booths and how many overall attendees there are for both manufacturers and everyone else. And we just try to focus that way. And in that sense, it was an absolutely excellent show for us. I thought that, again, if it's like this next year, will it be a success? No, I don't think it will. I think there's changes that have to be made and there's a lot that has to be done. But based on the situation that there was with COVID being an X factor, the fact that 19, most people didn't have a good show. And as Steve said, all the depressing things that were going on at the time, I think a lot of people wanted to see what would even happen. Would this implode, or would it be something that can be built on? I think overall it was definitely a good experience for us. And it was, I saw a lot of things that if they're capitalized on could mean that there's a better show next year than this year.
And just out of curiosity, the people that want to open new accounts, was there any more of that or less of that this year than previous years? I'm just curious, kind of based on how, the boom in sales and things like that, are there retailers that are maybe they can't fulfill product from other brands? Are they trying to fulfill that from other maybe brands that they hadn't engaged with previously?
From us, we had quite a few new accounts that were interested. But again, we're in that sweet spot right now. So, and I will say, and we don't have a very large initial buy-in requirement as a company, but it was too big a bite for some of the attendees there, which made me kind of think, I'm kind of curious why they're here. If they can't swing that. That seemed a little light to me. But yes. And the other thing too, is you gotta remember, we stopped opening new accounts last August. So the trade show was the first time where we had publicly said, listen, if you come to the trade show, we will open a new account. Of course, it was with the same rules that we opened all the other accounts, but still, it was the first time in a long time that we had opened new accounts. So for us, we saw new accounts. I don't know how many. I'd have to ask Cindy. She would know how many came on board. But in the end, it gets back to what I was saying. Eventually, we're going to run through all those, and I will have all 547 of those buyers, other than the 4 guys I think are absolute douchebags that I'll never sell to. We'll have them all. Wait, there's 7 guys. 7 guys. There'll be 7 guys out of 547. Sorry, my bad.
Okay. How about from your side, Terence?
Yeah, what was really strange is a lot of California accounts, which you'd think of all places. I mean, between lockdowns and taxes and everything else, you wouldn't get a lot of people from the show out there, looking to open. And there was quite a few from California, and there was quite a few overall. Again, sometimes you get, like Steve said, we don't have a very large buy-in either, and they're like, "Oh man, I don't know if I can sling that." It's like, man, how'd you get out here? Hotel it.
use all the money on the flight.
Yeah, I know. You're. I mean, maybe you would have been better off just calling us and trying to open the account. But in all seriousness, like, there was a lot of new accounts, and like I said, we're trying to make sure we fulfill our partners that are already with us first, but we told them that, as we get product, we'll open them as well.
Yeah, but think about this, Terence. Do you think there was anybody there that didn't have an account with Ashton, that wanted an account with Ashton?
Nope, I was going to say that.
No, I doubt.
Therein lies the issue that there aren't enough new accounts to. It's good for a company your size, and you're bigger than we are, but you're not massive yet. Okay, well, you're significantly larger than we are, but you still have room. You know what I mean? We still have room, and and Southern Draw probably has room, and Foundation has room, and Romacraft has room, and all these people have room. So for them, this trade show is probably going to work for another couple, 3 years, even if nothing really changes.
But do you think, Steve, again, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, just because the thought was so prevalent to what you're saying, like that you can maintain your business without really that personal interaction? I think there are Ashton dinner, which they spend a fortune on, and all that kind of face-to-face contact,
Terence,
personal relationship building.
I'm with you. I agree. I think that we're in a relationship business, and I think that getting together is critical. I just don't think that this is the mechanism that we should be using to get together. It's kind of like, I'm a big believer of separation of church and state on this one for me, but I'm sure we're going to get there, Aaron, so I'll leave it alone.
Sure. All right, let's talk to the media guys. We all know success is deemed by how many free samples you come away with. So just check in with you guys. How did it? No. How did it work out how did it work out covering the show? Were you getting access to the booths that you wanted to get access to? Were you getting the time that you needed? How did that all work out for you guys?
For us, it worked great. I mean, as far as actually covering the show, I thought PCA did a good job. They were a little bit more media friendly than they've been in the past. We were able to pretty much talk to everybody that we wanted to. Some people we made appointments with, other people we didn't. There was a couple booths that were super busy that we had a hard time getting into because we didn't have an appointment. But all in all, I thought the PCA did a good job handling the media guys this year. I guess my only suggestion could theoretically be maybe sometime in the future, the PCA could sort of limit the media, maybe vet out some of these. There was so many media people. I kind of felt bad for some of the manufacturers, honestly, because frankly, it seemed like, you could have spent the entire show just getting interviewed,
Right.
That would be maybe one slight thing. I mean, that they could think about doing, but as far as how the PCA handled us, it was great. They allowed us in early, which remember we used to struggle to get that.
Yep.
And they would say that they were, going to let us in early, but then we wouldn't be able to. So in reality, to be fair to the PCA, I thought they handled the media very well this year, and the show went great for us.
My free sample shot was clearly not a dig because I'm part of the media, so I would be digging myself. So everybody else seemed to think I was taking shots at you guys. All right, Coop. How was coverage for you?
We all know, like I said, it's important to know that that's why media is there, because
Right.
to get the free samples. But okay, so I'll give you my comparison. Last 2019, two-man team, Bear and I covered 79 booths. I knew it was going to be a lot less. I set a goal of 52. We hit 58. The reason for that is we were adding the interview component, and it was going to increase our time at the booths. And the way we're covering the show, because there's a heavy written piece, all four of us had to be in the booths. So I was doing the writing, Aaron Nielsen was doing photography, Bear's doing the interviews, Ben's doing the camera. We all had a role in there, but it did increase our time in the booths. We have to be a little more productive with that. Now, what I noticed this year is we got access to companies we've never had access before to. I could start off with Ashton, Padron, Hoti Blanco, La Galera. So we had more of that type of access. Now, I don't know if it's because, hey, now we've been doing this 11 years, people know who we are, or is it because that there was a little more time to do these interviews on people's hands? I'd like to think it's the former, but I don't think the latter could be ignored either with that. So I'm curious, that's kind of what, but again, we had access to people we never had. Ashton spent a lot of time with us. I mean, so
Didn't have anything else to do.
I'm just saying they spent the time with us, right? And they were great. They were really good. And it was surprisingly that they knew what we did. That was the part that was really surprising. And they were very aware of what we did from the discussions. So it's not like they were turning a blind eye either, but something was different this year is what I'm just saying. There's no question the media's had better access in the Scott Pierce era than we've ever had before. Yes, we got the early trade show access. The press conference I thought was key. The press conference, there was supposedly 80 media badges issued. I think the press conference had about 25% of that. We need to get more people at the press conference because we had access to the top brass at that press conference. We had access to Scott. We had access to Greg Zimmerman, who's the incoming president, and John Anderson, who's the outgoing president. So, that's kind of like my wish is I want to keep that press conference going more because it was our opportunity to do that. So I was happy as far as that goes. There's another problem that I'm seeing happen is there were people who got into this is what I've heard. Okay. I've heard people were denied media access credentials who were like influencers and then went to a manufacturer and got in. That's a huge problem. You can't have that. That was, I think, what was leading to the problem that Eric said. Maybe there weren't as many media badges, but people found other ways to get in. You can't have that happen. That's setting a very bad precedent. PCA has to look at that and control that a lot more. If someone's getting in with a manufacturer badge, they better be working the booth, not walking around doing interviews with other companies. That's just my feeling on that. But I think they can I think that's something that's fixable. And I think at least if we get Scott, I think Scott will listen to some of that feedback. So I'm very confident we can get that addressed for 2022.
All right, let's get to the retail side of things. And Jay, I know you had mentioned earlier about kind of what your game plan was going in and what you ended up, spending and things like that. But for both you and Abe, how would you deem the show for you? Was it successful in the buying that you wanted to do? And kind of the similar question I asked the brands was, did you engage Cigar Brands this year that you hadn't really engaged with previously?
Abe, you want to go first? You're the elder statesman.
You're on mute, Abe.
For me, that show was imperative because, for where we are now as a company, opening up our new warehouse, we were looking to bring on a lot of lines because right now everything that we sell online has been dictated by the linear footage in our humidor. So it didn't sell locally and we didn't have room to keep it where we store our cigars. We didn't carry it. Now the warehouse changes all that. So one of the main, and I like to meet people face to face when we do start doing business with them. Typically the scenario is somebody will reach out to us. They'll set a meeting to come here. We'll sit in my office. We'll talk, get to know each other. And we end up deciding whether we do business or not together. So for me going to the trade show, I think we opened up, I'm going to venture to say 5, maybe 6 new companies that we never dealt with before. Okay. So for me, that was really imperative and kind of really why I really wanted to be there. It's a lot easier for me to go in the course of 3 days, see various people who I don't do business with and get to know them and sit and talk and hopefully do business with them. So for me, it was good. For me, it was successful in that sense. And yeah, we ordered a shitload of stuff.
You, Jay?
Well, to go back to your last question, I thought that the legitimate media, and you guys can argue about what's legitimate media, what's not legitimate media, was great. What frustrated me is a lot of times I was at a booth and I talked to a principal. In fact, one time I was trying to talk to a principal about net 30 terms, and there's some dude with a phone who I've never seen. And I think I know quite a few of the bloggers and legitimate media out there interviewing the person. I couldn't talk to him. So I think media needs to have a place. In fact, I'm of the position that if it's available, let the media go in the day before the trade show opens and let them get a lot of interviews, because I want to hear what Cigar-Coop has, or Developing Palates, or Matt Tobacco has to say, or Cigar Journal, or guys like Frank Seltzer. But some of these folks, I've never heard of them before, and it was almost like a fanboy interview, and I think sometimes they got in the way. I'll let you guys argue that, but I would agree with Coop that I think that we need to define what media is better, because I know of one organization that had all the legitimate things to be there and they weren't allowed in. And I won't even get on all the consumers that I recognize on the floor. But I agree with Abe. I got to go to a lot of different booths. I opened accounts with 3 new companies as well. And I was very happy to have time to talk to them. There was one that I wanted to go to. I just didn't have time. And we had a budget for the show, and we spent, my brother would know this better than I did, probably 350% more than we planned, because I've been listening to wise people like Abe, and when I saw a good product and I saw good deals on it, I took it. I mean, I look at it this way: cigars are not going to get any more cheaper. So if I can get extra cigars that I know will sell and will turn, why not order them now? Because they're only going to be more expensive a year from now or 2 years from now. So we spent a lot of money and we went deep. Plus, I've also experienced a lot of supply chain issues, not just with cigars, but I ordered a couple of humidor cabinets. They're going to take 6 months to get here from China. So wherever I could, I ordered, and if I knew it was going to sell, I ordered deep, save a little bit of money in the process, because with certain companies, you just don't know. You don't know if you're going to. Now, the floor wasn't there, which I think personally was a mistake. I think they could have at least had a booth and said, "Hi, how are you doing? Let's support the show." But if you order DL 700s from LaFleur, you better order deep. If you order Hemingways from Fuente, you better order deep, because you might run out. They may not have them for 3 or 4 months. So when you have something that turns over and over again in your humidor, you need to order more. And it wasn't a thing, well, hey, I need 5, so I'm going to order 10. It was, no, I had 6 last time. I need 10 this time because things are moving. So from that perspective, I had no trouble ordering. Now, I don't know when things are going to actually ship. That's a whole nother issue. But to echo what Abe said, is I thought there were opportunities to meet new people, and I would have liked to have done some more business. I mean, there were good opportunities, and I'm glad that some of the companies that were there. And I missed some of the companies that weren't there. There are companies that I normally would order more from that were just not there. And now I don't have the budget for them. And we'll have to figure that out as time goes on.
All right. So a couple of topics that we've kind of touched on, but I want to kind of maybe get into them a little bit more specifically is, and we'll start on the positive side, what are some of the things that you think were done well at the trade show this year? And this could be anywhere from the seminars to the opening reception to the trade show itself to the lunchtime learnings, whatever was involved there. Are there aspects of the show that you thought were done well and could carry on and still be useful in future shows? And I'll kind of open that up to anybody that wants to chime in.
I definitely thought there was a lot of, there was a lot of effort to try to, whether, again, like the things you said, like seminars, there seemed to be more of that. The simple things like walking down the aisles and giving out beers on the last day and pizza. Again, which happened right as Abe and I were discussing, some of the things like they could be doing. Again, not that any of that stuff in itself is either essential or makes a difference per se, but I think that it shows that the effort is there, or the desire is there to try to make improvement and to try to do things differently and try to provide value in a different way. And that doesn't mean that that's just the extent of things, but I do think seeing some of these different approaches shows that there's an effort to evolve and to get better.
Anyone else have anything positive they want to say?
I like the debit cards we had, even though the retailers had to quote unquote pay for the lunches this year. The food was actually somewhat digestible, and the one thing that really surprised me, and I have to give credit to the Sands, but I think it's because we were the first trade show at the Sands Convention Show. The staff was friendly. They directed you to the correct bathroom. When the show ended at 5 o'clock, 3 or 4 days, we stayed late and just hung out at Herklotz's area with other people, and they weren't trying to push us out. So I thought the Sands, because they hadn't had a convention in a while, they were very friendly, and that was a positive in my opinion. I also like the seminars, but one of the things I mentioned to Scott Pierce is the seminars were great, but they're when I'm buying cigars. Let's make them at other times when the show floor isn't open, and I know that he's already taken that into account, because I felt like I missed some of those opportunities to hear people talk.
Yeah.
And that would have been nice to hear. But I think that there were a lot of positive things that they did. And I think that there was some input about, maybe having an after hours bar that would be on the trade show floor that would be a little nicer, like Herklotz's booth that would go after the trade show ended. And there was talk about that. I think that's going to happen next year. And I think that'll be a positive. Pardon?
Say that again, Abe.
I said there was an after trade show. It was called the Rocky Patel booth.
Yeah.
Listen,
Well,
if anybody got the vibe of what was going on there, it was Rocky Patel. That's where I think everybody wanted to congregate at the end of the show. He had nice live music going on in his booth, not overzealous and boisterous. It was a great mood. He had famous comedians. He had actors in his booth stopping by. He had a beautiful bar set up that looked like out of one of his burn lounges. It's where I was. I'd stop by, I kiss the ring at Saka's booth, say hi, grab some Ricola, over to hang out in Rocky's booth till they kicked us out at the end of every day. He had the vibe.
Do we really need a bar on the trade show floor?
Yes.
Tell you what I would do.
I mean, isn't there enough after that? I mean, honestly, yeah.
I'll tell you what
no place to sit.
I wish they had done. So like when the first day, the after hours bar was unnecessary because we could smoke elsewhere.
Yeah.
I think the PCA pivoted and they said, okay, well, let's open the bar up during the trade show, which I thought was a terrible idea. The last thing we as retailers want is an announcement for a free open bar at 1
Exactly.
in the afternoon.
Exactly.
But had they been smart about it, what they would have done is they would have opened that bar up at 5 p.m.
Right.
So that way people, as they were leaving the trade show, would have had a place that they could have all gone in case they didn't want to hang out in Rocky's booth. I think you would get a lot of people that would use that on the way out. Because look, you've been walking all day, it's tiresome, you've been doing business. So heck, I think you'd find a lot of people would chill for an hour and a half in a place together if it was convenient on the way out the door, okay, or at a designated spot. I think you would find it would have gotten a lot more use. And they could have done that with the space they had already had set up, but somehow somebody decided to open it up at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, which was a terrible decision. I think Jeff Borschowitz's wife lived in that bar. So, I mean, I think that would be a very nice addition. So they kind of had an idea that was good, but then they kind of messed it up. You know what I mean? And they just didn't make the right decision with it. But I'm hoping that next year they'll see that and that'll change. And I agree with, I believe Terence, I can't remember who said this, but yes, the Sands staff was much better than they've ever been in the past.
They were
It was
really
easier dealing with convention services than it's ever been. It was easier dealing with the drayage. It was easier dealing with the electric. It was easier. Everybody was much better than in the past. And at most PCAs, I bring about $2,000 in cash that I have to use to grease people to get them to do their fucking job. And, oh, where's my electrical? Where's my this? Where's my that? And honestly, I gave away no tips this year other than to people that deserved it. Where at every other previous trade show, all the way back since Nashville, the first one, I was blowing through cash just to get people to do their damn job. So that part was much better.
they hadn't been working in 2 years. And I think it's why a lot of people also went to the show this year. I mean, everybody's been cooped up. So I think everybody was just happy to say, hey, we got conventions going on again. But everybody was uber nice, man. We get so many nasty looks leaving, especially if you tried to walk out with a cigar or you tried to hang out in somebody's booth. Everybody was on point, Terence. They were super cool there.
All right. Any other positives? We jump on to the other side of things. All right. So let's keep it to this trade show, and then we'll talk about the future of the trade show and different ideas and things like that. But anything at this specific trade show that you thought was just poorly done, really wasn't thought well through, and just was a disaster?
As the guy that has to do all the show planning, the website was miserably bad. It was actually a step backwards. It's kind of kludgy. You had to email this person your tax form. You had to email this person your badge registration. You go on the website and there was just errant information. It's a difficult website to navigate. It was actually this year, the actual prepping and planning that we have to do as manufacturers to do everything that's required for the trade show was actually the worst it's been in a long, long time. And I found that a little bit like, I don't get that. I don't understand why we're going backwards when other things are getting simpler. And this year, that part of it for me was rather difficult. I don't know, Terence, are you the guy that has to do that at Aganorsa?
I did this year. I usually, in fact, because I hate it, I don't like to do it. This is the first year I had to do it. Yeah, it was a little difficult in that sense. I will say that I would call Erin or email Erin a lot, and she was awesome. She always responded fast. She always got me the information I needed. She told me where to go. So in that side, it was great to have somebody that you could reach out to and provide that support. But yeah, the site itself, it was like it took you into different portals, and you're like, wait, is this the portal I was in before? That could use some adjustments.
Anything else that wasn't done well?
All right, I'll say it. The PCA exclusive series.
It was done perfectly for me. I wasn't participating.
You didn't like the 3 samples you got?
I thought it went off flawlessly bad, which is good for me.
You had Dion who didn't have a PCA exclusive on display in his booth. I mean, look, I think Terence, actually, you did a good job. You did promote the releases. A lot of manufacturers, I don't think, promoted these releases. I don't think a lot of these releases were compelling enough to be PCA exclusives. To me, it just seemed like a lot of boxes were being checked. The one thing I will say, Terence, and I know there were reasons why, I think the PCA exclusive series needed to be announced 90 days ahead of time or more, because I think the whole purpose of this was to get people to the trade show.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, and you know, that's what, you know, I think that was the whole if there's another purpose for this, then I need to know what that is before I criticize it. But I think they just need to set some criteria next year with this too. I think you need to have the product on display at the trade show. I think they missed the boat having that pavilion. They were supposed to have a pavilion set up. That got messed up somehow, and it didn't happen. And I think that would have been great to have all those products showcased there. So to me, it seemed like the PCA exclusives were going down the road of TAA exclusives. The other thing is, it was never clear who had a PCA exclusive and who didn't, right? And an example of that is like James Brown had something that was an exclusive product at the show. It was this Hive set. You only can get it if you were at the show, but it was never promoted as a PCA exclusive. So it seemed like there was never a process to really promote those types of things. Now, PCA, I think, did a good job of promoting the products for a lot of the manufacturers. Probably in some cases better than some of the manufacturers. Like Terence, you were on a live stream with Scott.
Yep.
Like I said, you were promoting your PCA exclusives. I mean, we heard about it from the media. I didn't have to go chasing down asking what your PCA exclusive was. You told me. But in other cases, I had to go through cycles trying to find out what this was. So
in fairness, also just because you make a good point about, you want it out in time to drive people to the show. I think also this year, it's like the Wild West down there, you know, in Nicaragua, and I'm sure in Dominican and Honduras, it's very similar. I mean, getting things done, getting the artwork, getting the bands done, getting something that really is presentable to show off. That was much harder this year than it has been in the past. And because we planned on doing this over 6 months ago. It was just a matter of getting everything in place for it. And we didn't want it to release it where it was basically just words and not any picture, not any band. And even the way we did, quite frankly, wasn't, we didn't have like a really good box photo. So we had to use just the design image. So I think you're absolutely right. You've got to get that information out sooner and to have it be as effective as possible. This particular year, I can't speak for anybody else. It was just harder to get stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, now they have an opportunity. It's a year ahead of time, put a timetable, put a plan in place. That's the part I'll put on the PCA, is they need to put a plan and a timetable, because I think this could be something really special if it's done right, but they need the cooperation from a lot of the manufacturers. I understand this was a weird year, again, 100 days before the trade show. I understand that. But on the other hand, this series, these cigars were announced last summer that they were going to be doing this. And there were some companies that didn't even deliver on cigars that they promised. So, I'd never understood. Rocky Patel had one. He pulled it back, and then he took an old release and made it available as an exclusive. I don't understand where the logic was with some of these things. So they need to do a better. I think they need to do a better job, because I think this is something they can benefit from. But it needs to be executed better next year by both the PCA and the manufacturers.
Coop, I completely agree. They were supposed to have an area where all the exclusives were. And if you had the stay and play or whatever it's called package, you're supposed to get all the cigars, and you got 3. And I asked Scott about that. And I think it's a lot what Terence said, that the manufacturers just didn't have time to put them all together. But I can tell you, as a retailer, it was very frustrating trying to figure out what the exclusives were. And then Rocky changed his, and then like Fuente Padron, it was like you had to get Colombo out to figure out that it wasn't coming at this show. That was very confusing.
Can I ask a question, Jay? Was that building with the monitors that was empty? Was that supposed to be the PCA?
Yep.
Thing?
Yep.
My question is, why would
I don't know. The reality is the manufacturers weren't able to supply the cigars, and I think that one you could check off the COVID. But I think both sides, manufacturers and PCA, we need to do a better job of saying these are the exclusives for this year, and let everybody who comes as an attendee get one of those free exclusives in their bag. Because it was disappointing. I was expecting 15 exclusives in my bag, and I got 3. I wanted my free samples so I could taste them before I bought them.
Yeah, I thought that was actually, and when I saw that was out there, and that was my first question. I just had this feeling that most people weren't going to see those. And Jay, can you tell me can I guess what the 3 cigars were?
If I remember.
Crowned Heads.
Yes.
Ace Prime.
Yes.
There you go. I got 2 of the 3 already.
La Polina, no?
Espinosa.
All right.
No, La Polina didn't provide their. In fact, I didn't know till.
So it was Espinosa.
It
was the 3 sponsors of the opening
gala. La Polina actually had a second size of the Goldie that was exclusive that I didn't know about till I went to their booth on Tuesday. And I'm like, well, heck, I'm going to get the Lancero as well as a Prominente, but I had no idea that was an exclusive cigar.
You didn't read
until I got to the booth.
You didn't read Cigar-Coop.
Well, I was busy
because that was one I actually had reported. I'm kidding. Yeah, no, seriously, that was actually one that they did. But the problem, Jay, is it was like a couple of days before the trade show, and it was caught in the deluge of all these announcements. It
was rushed. You could tell people rushed. I think a lot of manufacturers got pressed into it when they started seeing other people doing it and saying, well, we need to come up with some PCA exclusive. And I think that's what the problem is. And I don't like the model. The model, I think, is already starting to fall or has been falling apart with the TAA. It was special in the beginning, and then
yeah.
I mean, what is there, like been 2 or 3 successful TA cigars in reality? If you flood the market with 50 PCAs, I think 2 or 3 may get noticed or really do any traction. And that's the problem with that scenario. That is a model to say this is what's going to draw people here is flawed.
Oh yeah, again, if you do it right, if you look at the ones that are successful, they're successful not just because of that. You can't, to your point, you can't just throw it in the box and say PCA exclusive, and then that's the draw. That doesn't really work. If you're telling me Fuente and Padron really do some crazy stuff that is exclusive to attendees, people will show up for that purely because it's them.
think if you allow 30, 40 PCA exclusives every year, just like how we have on the TAA, it becomes irrelevant.
It got diluted.
And that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about having a showcase and keep it as a small number.
You
And
want
these are really elite cigars, and these are the ones you really want to come for. That's kind of where I'd like to see this go.
Because it doesn't become a PCA exclusive. What it just becomes is another line everybody offers.
Right.
Yeah.
It's what happens if you. Here's my problem. Once again, it's the path of least resistance. It's these people who basically been running the TAA for the last decade who said, okay, let's just take this model and slide it over here and chuck it over here and plug it in. We're going to do this.
I'm going to be, yeah. And here's what I'm going to say. And this is, Abe, you had an event in February.
Yeah.
At the height is, you had no problem getting the product, is what I'm just saying. You had no problem with that. So why was there this problem now? And you had some pretty exclusive product there.
No, it wasn't easy. Yeah, no.
But you made it happen. And believe me, I don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is, I think it could be done. I know there were issues still, but there was a way to make it happen.
I'm a firm believer if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
It's hard. It ain't easy. But what you also have to remember is you have a board that's made up of volunteers who don't get paid. It's not their jobs. So they're not working this day in, day out, all day, contacting these guys. Where are you at with this? That's what I do. They don't have that, which, also comes down to the execution. You want to come up with something, you need to figure out how we're going to execute this and stay on track or whatever. Because I'll tell you what, and it's no offense to Steve or Terence, but they'll tell you, when I ask them for stuff, my shit ain't the only thing on their mind. And when they're doing stuff with the people, that ain't the only thing on their mind.
No, Abe, come on.
So, I have to somewhat pester and stay on them. And I don't know who's doing that for the PCA and if anybody's doing that for PCA, because I don't think it's any one of the 11 board members. And I don't know if Scott has the authority to do it. I don't know what that situation is. But regardless, I don't think that's going to be a long-term successful model if you're flooding the market with 40 PCA cigars every year. It's just going to be another line. You just might as well offer another line. Did Steve Saka freeze?
No.
He's still here.
He's very zen.
Yeah, he just moved.
No, it's just okay. So Scott contacted me on April 20th of this year to ask me about my PCA exclusive. Obviously, April 20th is not enough time. He contacted me once before, but not formally, like sometime mid last year. I can't even remember the exact date. So for me, it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. Honestly, I have a problem with PCA exclusives. The truth is, how do I tell a customer who I do really good business with, that is a real good account and they're growing with me, that I'm not going to sell them something, and that I'm going to only sell it to the people that come to a certain event? I don't want to be in that position. I mean, look, I'm somebody that tells people no all the time. So places that I can avoid telling people no, I try to avoid them. And this would have been that kind of scenario for me. So for me, it doesn't work. And the other thing too is, when everybody and anybody is allowed to make a PCA exclusive, then there's really no value in it. I would much rather focus my attention on a brand that I own and that I'm going to sell to everybody and I can grow. So I also have to pick where I'm going to put my energies, and making a cigar for the people that show at the show it wasn't in my priority basket for this trade show. Maybe for next trade show, time will allow it. I'm okay with making a PCA exclusive. I'm okay with donating money to the fund, because I understand that part of the purpose of the PCA exclusive is so that the PCA can earn some money to help fight the effort. So on that point, I'm good. But I mean, it was just, and I agree with Terence. This has been a really arduous, really, like almost since last March of last year. It's been really topsy-turvy. I can't speak for other people's businesses, but my business sucked last March and last April. And then all of a sudden we were shot out of a cannon at the end of April, and it's never stopped. And for us to try to squeeze in something would have been nearly impossible. And I have to think that that's the same problem that everybody was dealing with, because I mean, you have manufacturers now that are shipping stuff in refill bundles that would never, ever consider doing that because they can't get boxes made. And I've been struggling to, I mean, you have no clue how much it costs to have those Stillwell Star bands on those cigars at the trade show. I literally spent probably 4 times more than I've ever spent just to have some crappy bands on some cigars. And so it was a really challenging environment to try to launch that PCA exclusive program under, and it wasn't executed well. The problem that you have is, how do you pick the companies that do a PCA exclusive? Because everybody, that's the problem. How do you say, okay, 40 are too many, but who are you going to be the person that picks the 5? And who are you going to tell no to? And how does that work? And it's really, it's a ballywick. And I agree 100%. To me, it's just a bad idea that the TAA has, that they're just retreading for the PCA without any real thought about it. Because for the most part, most of those TAA exclusives, they really aren't all that great. And there's only been a few that actually bring customers into the store. But nobody's going into the store for a PCA exclusive. Maybe had the Fuente Padron one been executed, I don't know whether it was or wasn't. I don't know where that stands. That would have been one that would have definitely driven some traffic. But
Steve, you don't think that if you do, and again, regardless of whether it's 10 or 50 people, if you do a PCA exclusive, that you won't have people going to stores looking for yours, regardless of how many there are? I think it has nothing to do with how many. You would do a great job.
Terence, why do I need to do a PCA exclusive to do that? Why can't I just make any limited production product and sell it to all my customers? Why would I want to just sell it to those customers? And if the PCA is really interested in making money, then they should be happy that they let me make a PCA exclusive off book and donate the money out of that, because I'm going to sell way more Stillwell Star to the people that weren't at the trade show than the people that were at the trade show. Okay. So that would have been true if I had made a PCA exclusive. So if the goal is to raise money for the effort, then okay, let's figure out a way to raise money for the effort. If the goal is to get people to come to the trade show, I don't think that the PCA exclusive is a motivating factor for anybody.
That's a great point. See, there's a disconnect there. What's the purpose? What's the goal? Because the goal is to make a PCA, and this is where there's a disconnect, because what they do doesn't accomplish what the end game wants. If the goal for the PCA cigar was to drive money for legislation, then Steve's absolutely right. Why not just sell it to everybody? They'll sell way more cigars. He could have made a PCA exclusive, sold it to all his customers whether they showed up or not. Because, I mean, and Terence and Steve, you can correct me, 2,000 decent retailers in the country, 2,500 tops.
Probably 1,500 legitimate buyers at this point, somewhere around there. We've kind of shrunk down a bit.
Okay.
And so then the actual like really good ones, and Terence has more exposure to this than me. I would say there's probably less than 1,000 that are like really seriously, because you have so many retailers in the country that just buy through distributors only, and they don't buy direct from manufacturers anymore.
Okay, so my number's even inflated, which also makes a trade show a harder thing, because that's a really small cap. We forget how little retailers there are in this industry compared to any other one. So even if you got every decent retailer, you're talking what, 1,200 people are going to show up? It's still a small trade show. I mean, it's not a big trade show by any standards.
Right. There's not enough bodies to pull off that style of a trade show.
No. So, I mean, and that's the point. So, I mean, why have a PCA only cigar? I mean, it doesn't justify their end goal. Their end goal is to raise money. They would have just had it better. And like Steve said, let them just sell it. This is where I get confused about what the purpose of things are. What is the end game of the result of what you want to happen? Because if a PCA cigar is about getting people to the show, I don't think that's going to work long term. If it's about raising money to fight legislation, then what Steve said makes 1,000 times.
Why cap me to selling it? Let me run buck wild and earn the PCA. And look, I don't know the mechanics, but I believe it's like a certain fixed contribution per cigar. I don't want to disclose the number. It's not egregious though.
Oh, it's not.
And no, I don't think that they were asking too much, and I think it could have been put there. But yeah, again, for this first time around, had they maybe picked 5, 7 companies, made it executed, properly showcased them, it might have gone over a little bit better. But if you're relying on us to do the right things as manufacturers, you're screwed. Because the reality is most manufacturers, they suck just as much as the brick and mortar retailers suck. You know what I mean? We're in an industry of suckitude. So you can't just leave it up in the air that everybody's going to do the right smart thing, because they're not going to do that. And particularly when, the other thing too is, look, just as Eric was betting, a few months ago, there wouldn't be a trade show. You have to also think that's in the back of the manufacturers' heads too, saying, why am I going to go through this and do all this? I can't get the stuff I need to get done. And now I got to add this for a trade show that may or may not happen. It was a really tough year to try to pull something like that off. It really was.
By the way, hashtag suckitude should be, we should do a t-shirt. I think that's a t-shirt somewhere in there.
Your trademark.
Yeah.
Suckitude.
That's classic.
Any other things you guys thought were done poorly at this show? Otherwise, we'll start moving on, or we'll put the bow on this show and talk about the future.
Listen, all I'm going to say is my comments aren't made to dig at anybody. All right. I'm a firm believer in tradition. I like the show. I like the idea of going to the show. I enjoyed seeing a lot of people I haven't seen, my wife and I, in decades. But there's some real hardcore issues. Part of it is what Steve said earlier. Does this model even work anymore? Is it even possible? But my issues have been long-term, going back before COVID. I'm sure there were obstacles this year because of COVID and the missing of the year that they had to overcome. But a lot of my comments are geared to issues that go back over a decade. And so it just nothing has changed. And that's the way I've looked at this trade show.
Okay. So the trade show kind of came to a wrap, and then there was this photograph that was staged for everybody to take. And I think the goal of the picture was in good faith, but then there was just some poor messaging, I think, attached to it. And I think it went through a couple of cycles of discussions between people who felt that they were targeted by it and things of that nature. And then the message kind of got changed a little bit by some and maybe stuck to by others. Thoughts on this, on the photograph? I mean, Steve and Terence, were you guys invited to participate in it? Terence, I think you were in the photo, Terence?
Yeah, I was in there in the back, hiding in the back.
How was that kind of put together as kind of, or sold to you guys to have that photo?
No, it's just all the people attending.
Right.
We're going to get together for a photo. That was all. That was how it was presented.
Okay.
And then when we were all after the photo, there was a suggestion to add the caption, which I did not. And again, listen, right. I get it. There's a lot of big personalities and there's a lot of passion, and I think that everybody really believes that they're on the right side and doing what's best. And so I don't blame anybody. I would just say that my general approach is you get more bees with honey than not. And so, right. It wasn't something that I would put or do, but I also think that it was a genuine, it's out of genuine passion and care for the industry that anyone that did do it did. And I don't think it was what I would do, but I think that it wasn't me. I don't think it was mean-spirited, even though it certainly can look that way.
Right.
Unlike Terence, I believe the whip is appropriate at times. But I mean, honestly, I was not invited to the photo, or if I was, I didn't pay attention. I'm lucky I wasn't there because I would have been in the same photo. I agree. Look, the show would be better if everyone attended. That sentiment is true. Even if they attended in a small way.
Absolutely.
The message that went with the photo was just brain dead. Whoever was the idiot that threw that idea out, you need to get slapped up against the head. And for any of the people that agreed with that message, they really need to rethink their position. As someone that interacts with the public all the time and does it in a rather gruff manner, I understand how to navigate these things. That was just, it was like everything PCA. Communication has always been a bad part of the PCA and the PCA experience. And this was yet another example of just horrifically bad communication. And it was taking something that was really a good photo with a great sentiment and with good heart. And it was great to see the photo and just kind of like selling it for no reason whatsoever by just not someone raising their hand and saying, hey, I think this is fucking stupid. Maybe we ought to reconsider this. I kind of wish I'd been there because I definitely would have said something out loud. Now, I may have been voted down and that would have been fine. I just wouldn't have posted the dumb picture. But honestly,
in fairness to me, I thought it was a joke.
I still can't even believe that people thought that was the right thing to say, and that there's so many people there. How they can collectively come to that agreement just blows me away. Which again shows that things by committee are seldom very good.
I only know of 2 or 3 people that posted it that way. Listen, that whole drama happened while I was on a plane. So I found out about it the next day, and some people had already removed their post. Look, we're already too small to be so conflicted. And this is the problem with our industry. I think a lot of the reasons why the big 4 pulled out was people want to be listened to. They want to be heard. They want to have a voice. And I know this board when I've been on there, someone in his comments added they should let online retailers into the PCA, which they don't. If you don't have a brick and mortar, you're not in. I got news for you. Online retailers are a part of this business. But if you look at the last 10 people who've been on the board, I think only one of them sells stuff online. They when we were on the board, they would look at guys like me, Jeff, and Dave like we didn't belong because we sold online. I think those people left because they weren't, you don't listen to people. If you don't listen to their needs or concerns, that's what happens. I don't think anybody meant that message maliciously. It's one of those things, I think somebody threw it out there and, all right, this is what we're going to do without really thinking about it. And I think a lot of people realized it afterwards and took it down. But I really would like to see somehow this industry just get a little more congealed, and they need to find a way to work together. There has to be representation on all levels, small, medium, and the big, because we're just not that big. We're not that big of an industry. People, and I think mostly the consumers don't even realize how really small our industry is.
All right, let's talk about
Can I make one comment, Aaron?
Go ahead, Coop.
This industry needs public relations help immediately.
Yeah.
Okay, seriously. The industry and the association need public relations help. And I mean this sincerely, because PCA, no matter what they do, it's wrong, right? And then you have things like what happened with this photo. This industry really needs an image makeover, and they really need to invest in public relations. I mean, I know that funds are short right now, but I really think they need help. I would hope that someone would hear that.
Sure.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the future of the event. It could be an event of any type, I guess. We have this trade show. This is what we know it as, but people keep saying, it can't sustain itself like this. It should be something else, things like that. So I kind of want to throw it out to the panel. Things that you think are items that must change about the show. Not, I wish it would change. Must change. All right, go ahead, Steve.
Look, the goal is to get retailers to come to the trade show, right? That is the goal.
Yep.
It's good for manufacturers and it's good for the PCA. They need to give up this large annual trade show model, and they need to go to regional small models located in 4 or 5 different locations around the United States and convention center hotels. We set up like the TAA does for the actual selling part. It makes it so that retailers can drive in. So if they can drive within 8 hours, most would. Do one in the Northeast, like probably New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Do one in probably Atlanta or Northern Florida, do one in the Dallas Fort Worth area, do one out west, whether that be in California or Las Vegas, and probably do one in the Midwest. And they need to stage those shows at the appropriate time that those retailers in those certain regions are buying, because the South Florida guys, the Southeast guys, they buy heavier in October and November, December. Whereas at that point, the New England guys, they ain't buying jack. The Midwest guys aren't buying jack. And part of the problem with this current scenario is every year as a manufacturer, we go through a desert of sales, typically the month before the trade show, because the retailer's saying, hey, I know there's deals coming, so therefore I'm not going to buy anything until the deals break. And if you separate it out to 5 times a year in the right locations, you could then potentially actually limit the deals to the show, the people that are coming to that show, because we as manufacturers won't find ourselves in the cash crunch that we find every single year prior to a trade show. This is the first year I didn't find myself in that position. I think it's partially because we announced on June 1st we weren't doing any deals and discounts, but if we were to change our mind, whatever you bought in June would count towards it, is what we ended up doing. So I think that there needs to be much smaller shows that allow a retailer to come in on a Friday night and basically be there Friday night for a cocktail party, Saturday for a show, maybe Sunday too, and then let them go away. I think you would find that you would get a lot more retailers that would be willing to do that than buy a plane ticket, leave their store for, because even if you're only at the show for 2 or 3 days, it's still a 5-day trip. There's no way around it. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, I also think all of us getting together also is important too. So therefore, if you want to do something in Vegas, fine, but let's make it into a 3-day party. Let's have poker tournaments. Let's have slot tournaments. Let's have seminars. Let's have all of those things and not make it a function of the business. And the odd thing that I know most people say, well, manufacturers are not going to like having to do 5 of these things a year. But what I'm telling you is that if you're doing it light, TAA style, it isn't as big a burden from a cash flow perspective to do that. And also most companies, manufacturers, they'll plan things in that general region around that weekend that we do it. We'll visit accounts the week before, we'll visit accounts the week after, which is something we're all obligated to do already. You know what I mean? So we would just schedule it that way. I don't know that that's a perfect answer, but I know that that's maybe a sustainable model because the current model isn't sustainable. So that's my general basic idea as to the right place to go with this. But that requires a really, really big change. And the other thing that I would say is me as a manufacturer, I'm not asking for it to be cheaper. So most of our money goes to the convention service. It goes to drayage. It goes to all these things that the PCA doesn't get a cut of. They only get a cut of the booth and they only get a cut of the hotel. There may be some other things, but that's pretty much what they get. So honestly, they could still get the same money and probably more by doing these small locations. And just off the hotel block alone, just imagine if you did this in a convention hotel somewhere in the Northeast, New Jersey, probably Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania is a very cigar-friendly state right across the border. Just think of how many people are going to drive in for that. Think of how many more hotel rooms you're going to sell. I mean, everybody from New England would drive for a show if it was going to be happening in April of the year. And everybody everybody out west would drive in for a show like they do. We get a high presence of California retailers. We get a high presence of that area. But the problem is it's one of the least populous areas for retailers. Retailers are centralized in the Midwest. They're centralized on the Eastern Seaboard. They're centralized in the Texas area and whatnot. So I think you need to take the show to where the people are rather than trying to get the people to spend a lot of money to go to a show in Vegas. That's my personal opinion.
Why would I want to go to a show? Like, so let's say I'm in Stamford, Connecticut, right? And there's a show in Westchester, New York. Why would I want to go there just to place an order? Why wouldn't I just say, hey, you're going to be only about 30 miles from my store. Come to my store. I don't, that's the problem I see with that model. I could see that breaking for that reason.
Coop, let me ask you this. Right now, you're asking people to basically fly 2,000 miles plus and spend thousands of dollars. And now you're making it possible for them to drive a few hours. And look, people are human. We like to get together. I think if we made it more convenient, I think you would see a lot more people turn out.
But Steve, they go to Vegas because, you know what? It's the one chance of the year they see George Ferdrone, they see you, they see, Jose Blanco, whoever you want. That's why they're going there.
I think what
And
you
you're
would
not going to
find-
have those people at those regional
Coop,
shows.
I think you're wrong. I think those people would go to this because you have to understand the IPCPR, or sorry, the PCA, the way it's set up, it requires a lot of time and effort. And therefore, it's not like these principals aren't putting time into this already. And these principals still have to go to all these various places around the country.
I don't know how much time the I mean, you are as a principal, you're a much smaller company. I don't know how much time the
Right.
principals are putting into prepping for a trade show. They're making a decision here and there. But listen, I think that model makes more sense. But I think the smartest thing you said is exactly what you said. Fuck the selling of the thing. Make a fucking 3-day party, gathering, planning event where everybody sell tickets. You'll make more money than you probably
Right.
make on the show floor if you execute it right. I'd rather go party for 3 days with my friends instead of beating myself up on this trade floor, running around dying. I'm 50 years old. I almost had a heart attack this year. Every muscle was muscles were cramping. I didn't even know I had. I'd rather go for 3 days, see everybody. It's what Steve said. I'd pay a ticket for that. Go every year.
Cigar Aficionado does it. They do it, and they get 1,000 people.
I do it.
Yeah, Cigar Aficionado isn't the same as something that where
But
you knew that we were all going to be there to hang out and have a good time.
Yeah, I would totally go.
Because if you're in Vegas, we should take advantage of the Vegas stuff, and we.
I
don't.
agree, and I agree with that.
Well,
Jay, you raise your hand, Jay.
Yeah, well, I find it interesting that I was wondering if Steve Saka and Abe were at the PCA board meeting on Wednesday, because we discussed those ideas and we're exploring them. They're definitely considering some local trade shows, and then maybe something that's just sort of a standalone party where people can get together. And it's interesting that a lot of what Steve was talking about, they are openly discussing. And I know that Scott would like to see that, because there are advantages. It'd be great if there was something in Dallas and something in Philadelphia and something maybe in Atlanta and maybe something in Denver. And then maybe you have, a party once a year where everybody's together for 2 or 3 days.
Right.
And that's not selling. And God forbid, maybe you do something, I don't know, in Tampa tied with the Ybor City Cigar Festival, where maybe consumers can come and they can meet people. So a lot of these ideas are being discussed, and you may see some changes like that in the next couple of years. And I totally agree with you, Steve. I think that for me, I spent 8 days in Las Vegas. I'd rather spend 2 days, maybe going to Oklahoma City and go to one of the Indian casinos and hang out with people locally, and then be able to see you and make it a lot easier, a lot cheaper.
And here's the thing, Jay, you don't have to do it all in one broad stroke.
No.
Let's just pick one place, wherever it may be, Chicago, Dallas, Philly, I don't care. And let's do a test run. Let's have a small regional show, and let's just see how it goes. We don't need to figure out how to do all 5 in year 1 to replace the other. You know what I mean? But I know until we start doing something different, things aren't going to change. And I know that retailers are willing to drive, because I have retailers drive to come see me at a stupid cigar event at some other retail shop. Okay, so I know they're willing to get in their car on a Friday and blow away a weekend.
But that's
If it doesn't cost them a fortune. You know what I mean? And if you get rid of the airfare and you're staying at a convention style hotel, and you're going to be able to find these hotels. They're going to be much easier to find, and they're going to be much more economical, which is ultimately going to mean that the PCA is going to get to collect more cash to keep, rather than us spending so much money. I have no idea what everybody else's expenses are, but this trade show is probably about 85K out of pocket for my little company. It's a lot of real money. I mean, it's hardcore. And I could take that 85K and I could definitely visit 5 different places. And even if it cost me 100K to visit 5 different places, if it meant I got to see along the way an extra 300, 400, 500 retailers over the course of a year, then it's money well spent, even if it cost me an extra $10, $15, $20,000. I really think, because just this big Vegas trade show, it's just not functional anymore. It's just gotten too costly, too difficult. And this thing of doing it in July I mean, what do we have? 118-degree days, for God's sakes? Who the hell wants to be there?
Brutal.
Nobody wants to be there when it's 118 degrees. I understand the challenge. The PCA is trying to find a place for us to smoke. They have a big trade show. There are no places. Where do you go? The only place that's available is hell. Okay, here you go. Hell's available. You know what I mean?
And that's the great thing about having a smaller show, because if you have a smaller show with less people, it's easier to find places you can smoke where you don't have so many people. I think it's a great idea, Steve.
I mean, look at how Cigar Fest pulls it off at that resort. There are tons of resorts around this country that would love to have something. Okay. And even if it required us to set up in tents or pavilions or something like that, that would be fine if it's only for a day behind a table. I think there's a way to do this. I don't have the answers. The problem is what it means is it means that they're going to have to hire someone that's actually a really good planner. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that's actually good at this job, and they're going to have to let him run with it or her run with it and set it up. And oddly enough, they had that person in house and they let her leave, which was a huge mistake because that person has now made a whole new trade show for the other people. You know what I mean?
Going to take days logistically to handle 5 things in multiple areas. Logistics is going to be a hard execution with the staff they have.
With the staff they have, yes, I agree. But the point is the staff they have doesn't cut it right now.
But what
they're not going to have a job if we keep going down the path that we're going on. So for even their own livelihood, they need to start rethinking this.
The staff they have could do with some guidance of some innovative people, and is much less path, much more, I think, dual path is to do, like you said, more of a cigar festival, a cigar festival that would not only just be industry people and retailers, but consumers alike, because that's where the numbers are. The numbers aren't there with the retailers. I mean, that's just the sad part of it is the numbers. If we're looking to raise money to do stuff, that's where it's at. Make a 3-day festival, include stuff, and you sell a ticket, and you have a la carte tickets. Like, you want to be in a poker tournament? Here's the entry fee. You get a cut of a little bit of everything. Lot easier to execute, and honestly, that's the best idea I've heard yet. And don't try to redo what everybody's doing. Don't make another Cigar Fest or Great Smoke or anything. Be more innovative. There's tons of things you can do in Vegas that you could incorporate and sell a la carte tickets for. And I think if you make something epic, people will come for all 4 corners of the state, the country. They would come from all 4 corners.
But Abe, do you think that, like, for instance, you've done the Great Smoke for a number of years now, and it's been, obviously it's successful. You keep doing it, but how many years did it take before it was really a profitable? Maybe that's proprietary information, but generally speaking, these things take a while. Let's just say we did exactly what you're saying.
I lost money the first 2 years, but first off, you have to understand one. Okay, I lost money the first 2 years. I was also nobody the first 2 years. It was a local event. I think year 3 we made a few bucks or broke even, but that's because I went over the top the first 2 years. I was taking the loss because I wanted everybody who came to make sure they went home and told 20 guys what an awesome day it was. This organization, especially if we get the right people involved, you get some of the bigger guys. You got to bring Cigar Aficionado. You got to get some star power back involved. You redesign this from the bottom up completely. Include some stars. Include some people. The reach cumulatively is nothing like to what I have. This could be profitable, extremely profitable from year 1, executed right. From year 1, I think way more profitable than the PCA. The trade show is in its current format.
Yeah. And hey, Aaron, I have a question for our manufacturers, and I've mentioned this to a couple manufacturers, and I got shooed out of their offices. But we're already paying a ship tax. What is that? 42 cents a cigar. Why not have every manufacturer that wants to sign on add 5 cents to every cigar on the wholesale level, put a special sticker on the box, and that 5 cents goes to fighting the legislative efforts. I've mentioned that to some companies that are big proponents in the CRA, and I got laughed out of their offices. That might take care of a lot of this, but it doesn't seem like there's an appetite for that on the manufacturer level. We've got 2 manufacturers here to get your thoughts.
Didn't they try that, Jay? with the CRA, the stamp program?
Yeah, they tried it with 2 cents per cigar, and I actually paid the 2 cents per cigar for about a year and a half, and then they just stopped collecting. And I think the problem that you have is it goes back to my statement about being in an industry of liars and thieves. That it only works if people are telling the truth about what they actually sell, and therein lies the dilemma. It's very hard to get everybody to contribute, and then what ends up happening is if you're the guy that's paying the what was 2 cents or a nickel, and you have other people that aren't paying it, then it becomes a problem too, because it doesn't sound like it. For me, it's not a competitive disadvantage to raise a price by a nickel. But when you have a lot of people that are making cigars that are in the $4 to $6 range, a nickel makes a real difference. I mean, a nickel is a big deal. Look, even in my own experience at this trade show, I wanted Stillwell Star to be under $15, and I just couldn't get there because I needed a few extra pennies. So that's part of the problem with that system was there was no way for them to really checks and balances as part of the issue. You know what I mean? With that model. But would I be opposed to going back to it? No, I wouldn't be opposed. If they came up with a program, then yeah, I'm willing to participate. What I'm not willing to do is I'm not willing to sponsor something at the PCA. I'm not willing to sponsor an opening dinner. I'm not willing to sponsor banners. I'm not willing to sponsor that because I feel like I'm just funding something that is really going the wrong direction. And it just actually makes the problem continue longer. I was kind of hoping after the 2020 scenario and what happened in 2019, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more crash and burn, because when you kind of crash and burn, it kind of forces you to do something different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And kind of what we ended up getting was we kind of got a way that they figured out how to put a Band-Aid on this, make it hobble along, but we're still in intensive care here. You know what I mean? We none of the problems are being fixed. The real systemic inherent problems with the whole model, and therein lies the challenge. And I don't have all the answers. I just know that we have to come up with something, and I'm ready for them to start throwing some shit at the wall, just to kind of see, can we get anything to work? And I understand it's not gonna. Look, we're talking about taking something that's so different, because you got to remember, trade show used to not be this way. Trade show used to be the way I described it. It was done in hotels. It was much smaller, much lighter. You know what I mean? And it somehow morphed into this during the cigar boom that we ended up with these massive mega shows. I mean, we had shows that had like 6,000 people at them. It was crazy. It was bedlam. And at the time, the money was just flowing so easily that everybody was okay. But ever since the boom ended, this model has just been slowly deteriorating over time. And so we have a good 20-year track record of where we've been heading. So I don't know why we continue to head down the same road. That's my biggest issue.
Terence, you want to answer that or no?
No, I mean, I think that that there's a pretty good summary. I mean, yeah, what's the long-term answer based on where the world is headed? I mean, it's like if you had a horse farm in 1919, and you were like, if these Model T Fords go away, we're back to the glory days. I mean, yeah, that's not probably a great model, but it's just a matter of how do you keep what's great about this industry and try to keep the essence of it, where it's not kind of a waste of money, or it's not ineffective, or it's less effective than it could be otherwise. So I think Steve summed it up pretty well.
I think he did. I want to say something. I'm not a manufacturer. Sorry, Aaron.
That's right.
Big talk with Rocky. Okay. So here's the problem. You go back to how small our industry is. You can only beat the same 50 people over the head so many times. And that's what they're doing. You know, we listened to this speech. Rocky got up and talked. Some retailers got up and talked. I loved when they introduced the active new CRA board, and they said Satya. Oh no, he wasn't there. That was a moment. You can't. And Carlito came up and gave a really moving speech. Look, if legislation is what you want to fight, you cannot believe you will ever stand a chance if you plan on beating on the same 50 people all year long. It's one of the reasons why the CRA, see, the problem is there's a lot of convolution. Okay. The CRA was supposed to be signed to be a consumer driven organization. Now it's just become a manufacturer represented organization because the power is always with the people. And I don't know, I feel bad because how many times these same manufacturers add money to your costs. If you can't find a way to reach people, you're in trouble because the money and the power is in the people. You know, listen, I'm either going to sound like real smart or real stupid here, but like when I sat in the room originally, I can't even tell you how many years ago, when the CRA was first conceived, as far as legislation money, you're going to go there. It was always supposed to emulate the NRA, be consumer driven, because that's where the power is. That's where the power is with legislator, voter representation, and money. You know, Joe Rogan has been smoking foundation cigars on every show. You know, why does somebody reach out to a guy like that and say, hey, how would you like to be a spokesperson of the CRA? We'll give you $100,000 a year. You got to do 2 or 3. This guy may jump on it. And you know what? If a guy like that can get 500,000 people, 500,000, even 250,000, even 100,000, they say, hey, let us hit your credit card one time a month for $1, $3, or $5. If you get 100,000 people who just says, okay, hit my credit card for $1 a month, that's more money than they're going to raise all year beating up these guys. I mean, we're stuck in the same thing, doing the same thing over and over again. That's got to change because I'm telling you, the fight for legislation and legislative money is big time money. We're not that big time of an organization. And the people with the most money aren't fighting the same fight. And that's
the other thing too, is the manufacturers are, look, as manufacturers, I don't want to cry poverty because that isn't fair. But the reality is we're like all manufacturers. We're kind of at the beginning step and there's way bigger dollars coming out of the consumer's pocket.
Way bigger. That's
what Abe, you threw this idea out. Abe had talked about maybe coming up with a roundup program where people who purchase cigars online or in a retail store, maybe, I don't know how to execute it, but where, hey, if your bill is, you know, whatever, $97.19, that you could opt to round it up $1 to, and then that money could help. And I think you'd be very surprised because I do the roundup on all sorts of stuff and about stuff I don't even care about because I just don't want the damn pennies. You know what I mean? So I think you would find something like that to be quite effective. It would raise a lot of money.
In store, it could be done online with a lot of the big online sellers. It's simple programming. Legislative money has to stop. I mean, look, everybody should contribute as far as I'm concerned. Every retailer, every manufacturer should contribute to the cause. But for us to be the sole funding people is absurd. Absurd. If we can't.
And I'll tell you, Abe, I know that I actually that speech kind of bothered me because I'm sitting there in a chair getting chastised when I'm the guy that pays every CRA invoice that they send me. You know what I mean?
But Steve, not everybody does. So their point is they need more people to get involved. But what got my gut wrenched is it's not the answer. You're chasing a tail. That's not the answer to the problem. If you don't innovatively figure out a way to raise money with the people of this country, you're never going to raise enough money to lobby.
Right. I mean, the other thing too is if you think about it, Abe, so like they have these CRA samplers that they give the consumer when they register for the CRA, right? Okay. But honestly, they're not the ones that should be doing that. They should be getting the better retailers to be the ones to actually sell those CRA samplers because they actually are the people that communicate with the consumers and they have the relationship with the consumer. And I think you find plenty of retailers that would be willing to not take their full keystone cut on that. You know what I mean? That they would be willing to contribute to the cause, just the same way as everybody's willing. It's just, you have to have a mechanism that makes sense.
Last year I sold them as cost because I didn't want to make money and I just wanted to flip as many as I could quick, whatever. And I got eaten out by retailers. They got pissed at me. You know, I mean, look, but then again, there's bigger ways to fish and they have to figure that out. You know, look, you want to expand. Rocky just bought a new warehouse. I'm getting a new warehouse. You have to spend money if you really want to grow. To give a guy like Joe Rogan or somebody, the right person who has a huge following as an influencer, a salary to be a spokesperson, I think that's money well spent to implement some incentives for people to do rounding up things, simple incentives for people to do rounding up things and really raise money. I know what we do online. If we had a simple rounding up thing, I would imagine it would be not a small amount of money every year. There's ways to innovatively do this and banging the heads out of the same. I mean, look, Steve, you were there. How many people were there? 50?
Right. And honestly, of the 50, there are like maybe 20, 25 of us are actually contributors. So there's like, look, I was there with Cindy, right? So we're really one person.
Right,
You know what I mean? So when you start actually counting the multiples, they really were talking to a very small audience of maybe 30, 32 people, roughly, I would guess.
And trying to reach out to 10 or 12 who were there who maybe don't contribute.
Right.
I mean,
and that is not, and if you're gonna do it, then okay, then let's publicly shame those who aren't. And if I'm one of the people that need to be publicly shamed, then publicly shame me. I don't know, man. It's a tired approach. It doesn't work. It's not effective. And it's not really, like you said, Abe, it's not where the money is. The money is at the end of the rainbow, not at the start of the rainbow.
literally.
I'm on the manufacturer's end, and Terence can comment on this. I mean, we're basically looking at pennies at the factory level. That's what we're doing. I mean, we really are focused in that kind of way. And so there isn't the pot of gold that they think there is. And I can understand the frustration of those board members who have given a lot and don't feel as though the other people are carrying their weight, which of course also causes another level of animosity within the industry, which isn't conducive to actually accomplishing our goals. So we have to find a better way to fund these efforts than what we're currently doing.
But when you look at who's on the board of the CRA, I'm looking at the same people who've been on the board of the TAA and the same people who've been on the board of the PCA. Gary Pesch was up there with a whole bunch of these other guys who it's the same people. The same people are involved in everything. It's a very incestuous relationship all across the board.
I want to get some more. If anybody has any crazy ideas for the trade show, Eric, you have any crazy ideas that you'd throw out there to do something different?
I don't really have any better ideas than what's been suggested by Abe and Steve. I love those ideas. In fact, here in the studio, we've bounced ideas off, and a couple of them have been real similar to what they said. But I'll just say this. I think they have, a couple of years left on the contract there at the Sands. And so I'll just comment on what maybe they should try to do in the next 2 years, because there's no way they can sustain those two giant halls and just take up a third of the space like that. They need to get an event planner that could sublet some of that space, or bring back the vape and the hookah people. I don't care. They need to fill more of that space up with revenue. Otherwise, we're not even going to be talking about this, because I don't know how much you lose when you take up a third of your convention space, but it has to be significant. So in the next 2 years, they're going to need to be super creative about, bringing in more manufacturers of whatever kind, and bringing. I don't care if the retailers are there to buy vape products. Who cares? I mean, we just need more people, more bodies in that convention hall for the next 2 years. They're going to need to do something.
Industries that would be relevant to our industry, even whatever it takes. You're absolutely right.
And I'll go a step further. Like, I know there's tons of people that supply furniture for stores. There's tons of people that apply air handling systems. There's tons of people that supply bar equipment. The bar equipment business should be huge for cigar retailers. They really need to focus on that. And I honestly, I'd be happy for them to even donate the booth space to those people. If they've got the exhibit hall, give them the damn space and let them set up for much lower cost. And I'm okay with that, because if it brings bodies in, then that's ultimately the goal. And particularly given how many retailers have moved to the bar model, I don't even understand why that is an integral part of the trade show. It seems like it's something that should be there. There's so many things that retailers need beyond just cigars, and none of them are really featured in any big way at the trade show. And you can't expect the person that's selling the few humidifiers that they can, that they're going to support their own weight. So I agree 100%, Eric. They need to find a way to get more exhibitors and they need to find a way, and those exhibitors need to be relevant to these people's businesses.
Yeah, I mean, the vapes are gonna be tough to bring back because of the positions the trade association's taken. So keep that in mind. It's not, but there's no reason why you can't find other alternatives. Like I always, everyone always wants to pair with spirits. Has anyone ever considered inviting the spirits people there? I mean, so I think there are other things that they can certainly do.
And here's the
Yeah, I
funny
mean,
part
Coop,
about
I'd be on the phone with everybody, spirits people, bar people,
Yep.
you name it. I mean,
Well,
I think some vape people would come back, and if the the
Men's
exhibitors
lifestyle,
don't like
yeah.
that, so what? I mean, you got to do whatever you got to do at this point.
And here's the
Well, no, what-
thing,
yeah.
the spirits people, the liquor companies have all these ambassador programs that they do all across the country continuously. They have budgets for it. So I guarantee you that if they got the Williams and Grant people and the Pernod people and the Allied Domecq people, they would be very happy to have a pretty girl serving their drinks.
Listen, Jeff, I think Jeff Borshwitz is like the #1 account in the country for about 2 or 3 of those companies you just said.
Yep.
Yeah, they actually speak of him in very religious terms.
Seriously. Seriously, it's very doable. I mean, it's completely doable. And like I said, I thought I'd never have bars. Obviously, I think 10 or 11 years ago, we started doing the bars and the lounges and whatnot. It's become relevant. Why hasn't it been more involved in our show? I'd love to go see and learn new bar stuff and see new bar stuff. That'd be actually an asset for me.
Yeah, lounge chairs, you've got tables, like all that kind of stuff, right? Like anything that it takes to have a cigar brick and mortar. There's so much more to it than cigars.
Yep.
All right, Coop, you got some ideas for the show?
Yeah, I mean, I still think you had an idea, Aaron, that I thought was interesting. The whole after hours concept, right? Like it failed, but one idea you had, and I really like it, is why not open up that after hours thing for everybody? Not on the trade show floor. It's a chance you could kind of go to Vegas. You could hang out with the cigar industry people. You could sell tickets for that. It would be a revenue thing. It'd be very easy to do. You get commitments from some key manufacturers in there to do that. And you create you create this event thing that we've been talking about for a while.
But don't you think, Coop, they're just a little gun shy after the reaction to Consumer Con?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, so they're kind of treading on eggshells with that one. I mean,
Yeah, but like Abe was
disagree.
saying, that's where a lot of money is in the consumers, right? And
Right. Look, they were on that path, and even when while everybody was up in arms about Consumer Con, I was kind of the viewpoint of, hey, I think this will be a shit show, but it's a shit show I'm willing to do because what we're currently doing isn't working.
But
right?
but Steve, what they proposed was impractical. It was just not
Right.
well thought through. This is a lot simpler. It's separate. It's a separate thing I'm talking about.
Right.
And you
I
kind of
agree.
work it that way.
I'll
'cause
tell you
have the-
another thing. I don't understand why they just don't set up places for media to operate out on the trade show floor. I would be doing everything possible to get as many media people as possible, as easy as possible, because the more media, look, you guys know this from dealing with me. I spend my entire trade show talking to media. That's all of my appointments. That's what I do. I use the trade show to talk to media because I know that, okay, I'm at this trade show. I can talk to 549 buyers, but I also have staff that do that and actually know how the hell we sell things and know the accounts. So I'm the wrong guy. So I want more media involvement, not less media involvement. The thing that Charlie at Half Wheel and those guys pay for, I don't understand why the PCA doesn't provide that for free for all the media people there. I would want to do anything possible to encourage as much coverage as possible at all times. That's what I would want because it's the best benefit of the trade show, in my opinion, is being able to get the message out.
Yeah, I can tell you that this year, for the first time, at least from what we're doing, I could have benefited from having a fifth person somewhere on the trade show for doing work throughout the day. So I think I've gotten to that point. I don't know if most media people are big enough to do that. So, you can't just give like 80 different media outlets space.
Yeah, but what does it cost for some tables, some electricity, some curtains? You know what I mean? We're not talking about a big expense.
Yeah.
And there certainly was space on the trade show floor to allow that to happen. Now,
Charlie
you want
shared
your own private little thing, then great, you can pay for it like Charlie paid
Right.
for it. But I think providing a place like that makes sense to me. Again, I want to, whatever gets more exposure is always good.
as long as it doesn't substitute. My theory on this has been, as long as it doesn't substitute us walking the trade show floor. Every year, someone, I even heard it tonight, brought up, you need to have a media day. Well, if you're going to have a media day, that cannot take the place of, because here's the thing, our audience, they want to see the vibe of the trade show. That's what they want to see. They don't want to see things in a curtained room. I can tell you that, that's enough doing this long enough. They don't want to see that.
Right, but I'm not suggesting that. I am
Okay.
suggesting
You're just suggesting having an area
I'm
to
saying
work.
that there should be a workstation area for everybody to
Yeah,
work.
TPE provided us that, by the way. TPE did provide that.
I'm sure my friends at PCA don't like hearing that.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you guys think about a media row like at the Super Bowl? Maybe the media's there earlier in the week and they still have time to go to the trade show floor. But I think media row is a great idea at the Super Bowl. You get to interview people, and maybe that is something that happens. Maybe not during all the trade show hours, but maybe before and after, the day before, something like that.
it wouldn't work for me. I could tell you that.
Yeah, it wouldn't work for us either, just because then all of the interviews would just be identical. You're sitting at a table.
Yeah. It's a part of a lot of what we do is, again, a lot of us, I know focus a lot on the products. So we're integrally trying product coverage with the interview piece. I mean, if someone just, like, there are media outlets that go to the trade show because they do personality coverage. That might work for them, but I think with Eric and I, where we go a lot deeper with the coverage in half wheel, that would be more, I wouldn't benefit from going and doing that. Maybe the only thing I could do is maybe get a few other interviews in, but I still have to go to the booth to do work. And a lot of times, like this year, what I learned is we're tandeming the product coverage with the interview. So I think it would be, and I think it would also be a logistical nightmare.
It would be hard. I could say as a manufacturer, I don't ever leave my booth except to take a piss.
Yeah.
So the concept of me taking time to go to a media row probably would not happen.
And it's costly if you guys have to go out there early to do media row when you're
And the other
out
thing
there already.
too is it's nice to have the product there so that, some people, they don't want to look at the product in their video shots, but others, they get up, they're taking stills, they're taking close-ups. So I think doing it on the floor makes sense. But I have a hard time envisioning manufacturers being able to visit a media road during the event. I think
we could do the interviews in the bathroom like I did with her class. I mean, that's an idea.
Yeah, that worked well. Got you some views.
Let me say this. Honestly, if you're a media person, you could actually turn that into your shtick for a show, couldn't you?
Oh yeah.
For the most part,
Yeah, that's why they're going to set up the workstations just in the stalls of the bathroom. So we got to put different media outlets on the doors to each of the stalls, right?
Yeah. Or here's another thing I'll say. Okay, Jay, this is something you could take back to the PCA board. If you look at the content that Dojo, Coop, Developing Palates, Half Wheel, there's thousands of pieces of content out there that's free advertising for this trade show. We see none of it shared by the PCA. Why is that? I don't understand it. Why is this not being blasted on there? I understand you can't do every one of these, but you have this free publicity model already there. Why isn't this being blasted on the association page every day?
I think that would be a great idea. I think part of the problem is that a lot of the guys on the board are not and that's part of the problem too. They're all guys, but a lot of the people on the board don't really have a social media presence, and I think that needs to change.
Yeah,
and
I think
I agree.
Yeah,
if, for example, why wouldn't PCA put out an article that you write, or that Dojo writes, or that Cigar Journal writes? Like you said, it's free advertisement, it's free information. I mean, every night at midnight or 2 a.m, I'm reading your articles. I'm reading the different things that were recorded that day during the show to decide what I'm going to do the next day. It'd be good if it was all in one place.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you can't do every article from every media outlet, but there's a lot of good content that I think, that members could benefit from. Occasionally we do see something shared, but not, I mean, I would expect hundreds of posts from the PCA, after this trade show. I mean, there's just a lot of content out there that everyone can benefit from.
I agree.
Well, Gentlemen, I have to call it an evening. My phone is going to die, number one. And number
Understood.
two, I've
Gabe
got to
Capital would
go
have
to
had a
bed eventually.
charger. Gabe Capital would have had a charger.
I have a charger, but then I got to take off the headphones and I got to go. I've been doing that actually for the last half hour.
But John
You're right,
Carney
you
will be
would.
in his car with the charger. Come on.
Thank you, Terence. We appreciate you
Thanks,
joining
Terence.
us tonight.
No, but thank you
Thanks,
so
bud.
much for having me. Thanks to everyone who else is on there. It's a pleasure to always see all of you, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
It truly
Absolutely.
was the greatest day of our lives, Terrence.
Yeah.
Greatest day of our lives. I'm glad we got to share it together.
Hey, before you
Thank-
leave, Terrence,
Yeah.
if what should I be smoking for Aganorsa this year? What should I look forward to?
It's Aganorsa.
Yeah,
I would smoke the PCA exclusive. The PCA exclusive.
Ah, there you
Yeah.
go. The PCA exclusive.
That's what I would go for. Thanks, guys. Take it easy. Have a
All
great
right,
night.
thanks, Terence. So on Saturday, I published an article on developing palettes, and I was kind of just throwing out some ideas for events to have during the show. And the events are not necessarily, they would take away obviously from the traditional trade show as it is being on the floor, buying and stuff like that. But if the event became more of a social event, I had the idea of doing a retailer competition where you have, employees that work in the store and how they interact with consumers coming in. And you have a judging panel that can judge that, how they deal with people coming into the store, how the employee interacts with them, whether it's at the register, in the humidor, at the bar, whatever it is. Set up the criteria, you have the judging, and it's a competition between stores. And they get to, you get to two things. One is you have the competition factor. The other thing is you have kind of this peer group mentality where you get to see what other people are doing. You can bring it into your store or whatever it is. You just get to see different techniques and things like that. So that was one of the ideas I threw out. The other was kind of like an Iron Chef competition for blenders, where you have a library of tobaccos and you have a special tobacco that gets thrown out, and whatever blenders that are competing, they get to go through their tobaccos. They, figure out what they want to put together. They put together a blend, and then you have a panel that kind of goes through those cigars, and you can have a competition that way as well. So I don't know if those would work, be more of something that, people would want to see and things of that nature. But I think those be like fun events that, the industry could come together on, because it's not just, it wouldn't just go towards, the retailers only, the manufacturers only, things like that. So just ideas of things that, they could add in that would create some excitement, some buzz, some eyes on, people doing something that they do in the industry, just to kind of get
Aaron,
something different.
Aaron, to add to your idea, I like this idea of the contest. Like at the Great American Beer Fest, which is the biggest, beer event in the world. It happens in Denver every October or whatever. It's a consumer event, but you can still do this. You have categories, like at the Great American Beer Fest, it's, the best Pilsner,
Right.
so like different manufacturers submit, their entry into that if they want to. They don't have to every, they might skip all of them but one, like maybe it's the best large format cigar, over 60 ring gauge or whatever it is, right? Like best Connecticut, and you could have some sort of judging panel. And then at the end of the show, like they do Great American Beer Fest, you have, best of show, you have best Maduro, you have all these sort of awards. I like that idea. And we've actually bounced that one around here in the studio as well. So I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah. Thanks.
I think we should get Steve Harvey, who's a big cigar aficionado, to do like a family feud. And you have different stores come up and do their surveys. I think that'd be hysterical if we could afford them. We'll give him samples. All the media samples go to Steve Harvey.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I just think there needs to be something more like, if you're going to have it more of an event, like if you end up doing these regional trade shows and that's where some of the buying happens, and then you have that thing where everybody's getting together for more of a social event where you have these kind of things that you can do that just brings people together a bit more, and, poker games, whatever it is, those things like that, where you're, you can go on to whatever these events are and enjoy yourself for a few days with the people in the industry. So.
With the regional stuff too is, so when you come out with a brand like Stillwell or something and you're going to show it in this region and the guy in another region ain't going to get it or see it till 9 months later. I mean, there's a lot. Listen, I think it's tough. I think the model of selling's tough, whether it's local or whether it's national. I think it's very, very hard. In today's day and age with Zoom and phone calls or whatever, don't know how necessary it is. I mean, I think Pete said it here. You're almost better off going back to the hotel room days and just renting a floor and going room to room. You know, I mean, I love the idea of letting the PCA handle a national celebration day, a cigar celebration day, like they do in Cuba, like they do now. A lot of the costs can be done for one thing that would involve everybody instead of every manufacturer storing stuff, dredging stuff, doing it. And then money can be raised not just by ticket sales. I guarantee you get 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people show up in Vegas for some big celebratory thing. Manufacturers will be a lot more willing to cut a check for a sponsorship of one of these events or different events, or the poker tournament, or this event, or the retailer mud wrestling event, whatever. I mean, we're not going to think it all now, but I think that's the route to go. And I think people got to sit in a room and brainstorm and come up with a 3-day epic weekend in Vegas. Or whatever. I mean, listen, Vegas is nice because you got everything from bulldozing stuff in Vegas to whatever. I mean, there's stuff that can be coordinated, but it doesn't have to be Vegas.
All right, I think we're reaching the end of the show. I don't want to keep people on the East Coast past midnight, I guess. But
We had the over.
what was your over, Coop? 2 hours?
Over 180 minutes.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Aaron, I made it through the whole show.
I kept an eye on you a little bit. I saw you kind of fade a few times here and there, and I saw you lighten up that new cigar. I was like, all right, he's in it.
Eric looks like a solid tan.
Yeah,
That's Vegas tan.
I think he spent more time out by the pool than he did on the trade show floor. Is that true or not true?
That is 100%.
All right. No, you couldn't have stayed out in the sun like that. You would have died.
Great.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of you guys for joining us tonight. Fantastic show. Your opinions are all great. I love having, talking to you guys. I knew that this would be a great interaction with all of you. Glad that you all had successful shows. Hopefully that continues out through the year. And I think we'll definitely try to touch base again on this next year, because I'm sure there will be plenty to talk about. I think that's it. It's a wrap. Anything else? Anybody that we didn't cover? You guys want to say? All right.
Abe, $5 on the next one. What are we gonna do? All right, baby, we're in.
All right, everybody watching.
You heard it. You heard it here first.
It's recorded.
Bet me $5 right now that there won't be a trade show next year.
You know what? I'm a gambler. I'm a gunslinger. I mean, let's just go for it.
Anybody that we didn't cover? You guys want to say?
Nothing. I'm willing to take that bet.
All right.
Just because my man Jay Davis is on the board now. So you sign me a second bill, or I give you this one back.
Yes, double or nothing.
Got it?
Yeah.
Done. Deal made. Hold on, I got to post it. I just took your old post-it down.
Hey, I do want to say that this was the most successful PCA show in the history, because it was the only PCA show ever in history.
There you go. That's true.
The old loophole.
It was the worst as well.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all for joining in. Thanks to everybody that watched. Thank you for staying in the whole time. It was really appreciated. I know that we covered a lot of stuff, but thank you all, and we will catch you on the next time we get together.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.